Welcome back. The extended Yahoo version of the deeper dive. We appreciate you rocking with us. I didn't realize my fingers would be up there, Jordan. I apologize. All right, so here it is once again on a Monday afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are on the planet. Myself and Matt here getting you ready for this gigantic, full 10-game slate that I know Matt is chomping at the bit to break down here on Yahoo. Click those links below if you haven't already. You're going to get 10 free bucks. And of course, if you are new to Yahoo, sign up. You're going to get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. I tell you that now. So hopefully if you forgot, you can jump in, sign up, and use all of our tools and metrics on Awesemo, Awesemo Plus, and the Awesemo Plus Platinum, alongside what Matt's going to tell you, my brother. How you doing?
I'm good. 10 games is pushing on a little too much for me, as I was telling to Jordan off the air. But on Yahoo, it definitely leads to an interesting slate. There are a lot of different plays you can consider, a lot of underpriced values. So I know we always typically start by saying, is this a stars and scrubs night? I'm just going to jump right into it, Eitan. It's a stars and scrubs night.
I love it. All right, so I know 10 is not the sweet spot for you. I'm assuming that it's a couple of games lesser on the slate, but let's look at it from the standpoint of the 10 versus maybe a sweet spot of 6 to 7 games on a slate. What changes in your approach? I know every night, everything is different as far as the variables and who's playing, but I'm sure you do have somewhat of a general strategy that shifts when the games get larger on the slate.
Yeah, I think when you start talking about a 10 plus game slate size, it becomes even more imperative to really think about the chalk plays, right? If you're on a 6-game slate and somebody's standing out as 40% owned, it's a little bit more viable to eat that chalk, in my opinion, because you have less players that he's competing with, right? If you have a player who's going to command that kind of ownership on a 10-game slate, and we do have a few of those today, there are just so many other players who are going to check in with a fraction of the ownership that could potentially outscore them or, outperform them, provide more value, whatever. So I do think that if you're willing to sort of go with a little bit more contrarian mindset, these big slates are a good example, a good opportunity for you. I struggle with that myself. I know, it's so hard sometimes. You see these guys and you're like, well, how can I not play so-and-so at the minimum, right? They're just looking like such a better play than everybody else, but you have to kind of take a step back and say, what are the chances that this is going to happen relative to the ownership?
All right, so let's start at the 1. We'll move through each of the 5 positions here. If you're hanging with us, hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed, of course, as well. We've got the DFS, the odds, and the season-long channel. So I'll ask you without diving into it specifically, but I am curious as we go through each position, if it's a stars or a scrubs position. And if it's a stars position here, we know LaMelo Ball, the injury there. DeJounte Murray has not been overwhelming by any means. Ja Morant also dealing with an injury, right? Similar to Ball. Then you start getting to like Chris Paul, Trey Young. We still have Dame Lillard. A lot of these guys are out as far as what would be quasi to full on pay up options. So it may not even be a stars if it's that, Matt, so much as it's just a star and paying up for Steph.
Yeah, I think DeJounte warrants some star consideration too. He's played his way into that level with what he's done so far this season. But I do think looking at our projections, we have DeJounte and Steph as sort of like lower tier payups at their salaries, right? They're not projected for as many fantasy points or as much value as some of the other studs on this slate. And I do think at the opposite end of the spectrum, we have a lot of potential value options. So for me, this is a save position.
Okay, so if that's the case, save in the sense of it's more of a scrub spot.
Yes.
Spend down. All right, well then, I'm curious where you draw the line. And look, scrubs, I get it. It can be harsh to describe a guy like Drew Holiday or Kyle Lowry.
But right. I don't think them or their families are watching.
Exactly. That's fair. You know what? You took the words right from my mouth here. We're not in the business of making friends. We're in the business of making money, by all means. So where do you draw the line where you start to look at the option of return and also being able to save money, not necessarily just at this position here, but really across the board, because it's one thing to say, well, yeah, all right, let's get to a Malcolm Brogdon, let's get to even a Drew Holiday, 34-30 respectively, but you're not saving a ton necessarily if you were looking at a major spend down option on this slate.
Yeah. So right now, I do think that the very, very bottom of the point guard position is where the majority of the ownership is going to be focused today. If you look at our projections, 2 of the top 3 guys in our Yahoo projections from a value perspective play point guard. And it's Dennis Smith Jr. and it's Cameron Payne. And we have those 2 guys projected for a combined nearly 70% ownership tonight. So those are the 2 players that you kind of have to start by discussing. And Smith is expected to be the most popular option. He moved into the starting lineup in the Blazers last game. No Damian Lillard, no Anthony Simons. And Dennis Smith Jr. is a very good fantasy player. He leaves a lot to be desired with his actual game. But from a fantasy perspective, he's over a fantasy point per minute type of guy. So if you think he's going to get, upper 20s, lower 30s minutes, which is what we have him projected for, there is a very good chance that he is going to return value at this current number.
All right. So you mentioned the ownership that we have here for both, really, again, our projections, the main slate ownership projections, part of what's going on Awesemo. So the packages are all there for you to follow along as well. But even campaign 0.25% owned. Now, Dennis Smith's at 46, and we'll see how that adjusts as we get closer to the slate locking. And Cameron Payne is at 0.25. So we're also taking advantage of injury. We're also taking advantage of expanded volume here. Is Tyus Jones now the obvious cheap pivot away from ownership for both of those guys in Smith and
I think there are a few. I think Tyus is one of them for sure. He's somebody who has given us some nice starting, some nice value here as a starting point guard for the shorthanded Grizzlies, right? He's coming off 35-7 and 38-7 Yahoo points in his past 2 games. Really good numbers there. So certainly you can take a shot with him at 17. Ish Smith going to get another start for the Hornets tonight, you would think, with no LaMelo and no Terry Rozier. He's at 14. I think that's viable. He's not quite as good as Dennis Smith Jr. on a per minute basis. He's like a 0.8 fantasy point per minute type of guy, but still good enough. And then if you really want to get creative, you can go down to some of these other guys we have, like a Killian Hayes. He's at $11 right now. People kind of forget about this guy. He was a high draft pick last year, a guy that, a lot of people thought was one of the better players in the draft. And he's racked up now at least 31 minutes in back-to-back games. So he's interesting to me against an Oklahoma City Thunder team that we know isn't that great defensively.
All right, so let's keep it moving here. Is there anybody else that we've missed by any means on this spot that's worth a mention?
Yeah,
Doesn't look like,
Trey
real
Young,
quick,
maybe, just some of these mid-tier options, if you wanted to go with a different direction. I think Reggie Jackson makes a lot of sense at $19. He's not necessarily a value, but he's pretty fairly priced, I think, at that number. I'll keep going back to the well with Malcolm Brogdon, given all of their injury situations. He's kind of somebody that, can play a little bit extra with no Justin Holiday, with no TJ McConnell. So, and he's been awesome recently. So he's only projected for less than 4% ownership tonight. I definitely will have more than that.
All right. So looking at the 2 here, again, at the top, you're not necessarily spending up like you would across the slate, but there are guys at the top. And of them, McCollum is picking up the most ownership of the guys that you would be spending on. And there's Cade Cunningham kind of working his way in at that $26 range. But realistically, Matt, when we're looking at our projections as a whole, Cody Martin is the punt option that a lot of people are getting to. So you kind of have 2, or really you have 3 different tiers here of rostership, where you've got McCollum as somebody that you're paying up at the top. You've got Cade Cunningham, who's somewhat of a relief of McCollum's salary. And then at the bottom, you've got Cody Martin.
Yeah, and Martin, right now we have him projected 28% ownership. That's not quite as bad as somebody like Dennis Smith Jr., but it still makes him pretty chalky for a 10-game slate. But the big difference is that there's no obvious pivot at this position, right? Like there were a lot of point guards priced $20 and under that I thought you could make an argument for. This position, if you're paying down, Martin is the guy at 10. And then I think you can talk yourself into maybe Chris Duarte at 15, okay. Similar logic to the Brogdon play. Or if you need to stick with a minimum price player, like you could go with Duncan Robinson. But I do think that Martin is just grading out as a significantly better play than Duncan Robinson at $10.
Are you getting to much McCollum, assuming that he's probable he's going to play? Are you getting to much McCollum, or at least somewhat relevant to the field?
Yes. I think that this is a position where I'm more likely to spend up. And I think McCollum, like you said, is kind of at the top of that list. But I think my favorite play at this position right now is Karis LeVert. He's priced at $20. I think that's a very fair number for him. Coming off of basically his best game of the season, he played 37 and a half minutes. He finished with 27 points scored. This is a guy that the Pacers are going to need, right? This is a player that they're going to rely on, and his role should only continue to grow for this team. So I think this is kind of a nice opportunity to buy a little bit low on him. And with the only 11% ownership, I feel like that's a stronger play to me than maybe going with somebody who's going to command a bit more.
I thought you might be going Seth at 17.
No Seth today, unless Tobias is out, and then we can talk about it. But for now, there's only one 76er on my radar, and we'll talk about him later.
If Tobias is out, though, it's hard to ignore. At the very least, the guy at $17 volume is going to go up.
Yeah, for sure, the volume would go up. And the matchup is great, right? The Hornets have been one of the best matchups in fantasy this year because they're one of the few teams that's still playing fast, and they're not very good defensively. And you look at what Seth's done with the team at full strength recently, and he's been pretty good. So, I'll be honest, he's kind of so far down the board that I haven't given him a lot of thought today. But should Tobias be ruled out, then yes, he's somebody I think I would find myself on a little bit more.
It's a parlay of circumstances, my friend. It's not like I'm jamming him down your throat right now with the healthy Tobias Harris. I recognize that some things need to happen. Where are you with Beal? Just before we move on, there are a couple of guys right there at the top. I know that you've mentioned Russell a couple of times as far as possible pivots of ownership in other slates, but anybody on the top that you want to mention that we haven't hit on before we go to the three?
Well, the Timberwolves are a situation to monitor, right? They have basically their entire team listed as questionable at the moment. Towns is questionable, D'Angelo Russell questionable, Patrick Beverly questionable. So depending on what happens there, I could find myself on D'Angelo Russell if he's in and Karl Anthony Towns is out, something like that. And I would love to keep making the buy low case for Bradley Beal, but it just hasn't been there, right? We're kind of, if you're saying Bradley Beal is a buy low option at $36, we're kind of comparing him to what we've seen from him in the past. He really hasn't been that player this season. So, he's had some good games with Spencer Dinwiddie sitting, but there's just not much there right now. So I'm going to keep letting other people take the plunge on Bradley Beal, and I'll go elsewhere.
Okay. Yeah. No worries, man. I want to make sure we get him.
Dinwiddie is out. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have missed that.
Yes.
Okay. Bradley Beal back on the radar.
There you go. Okay. So on the radar, but how much does that change what you just laid out? I mean, drastically, or is it just marginally moving?
I would say pretty drastically. I mean, that's a pretty significant spike in usage for him. And he's somebody that we're projecting for less than 5% ownership. It doesn't take much to be over the field on him, right? So
$36,
I was probably not considering Bradley Beal, but now I will say I would expect to have about 10 to 15% on him.
Yeah, think about it. You're saving $1 with McCollum, $2 with Levine, 32 to 36 with Beal, but the impact of not having Dinwiddie out there outweighs that exponentially, right?
I would say yes. And again, the Pacers haven't been a defensive juggernaut this season. So you look at Beal, the production is not elite with Dinwiddie off the court. He's at 1.14 FanDuel points, Yahoo points per minute. But the usage does go up to around 31%. I'm just saying there's upside. I don't think that it's necessarily like a smash spot all of a sudden, but he definitely becomes more appealing when you take away a player like Dinwiddie.
All right, so let's look at the 3 spot here. Reminder, Lofty, Adam coming your way in just over 10 minutes with the deeper dive, the full expanded deeper dive, as we focus a lot here on Yahoo, and those links are there below for you for a reason. So make sure you take advantage of that. $10 free to play with, and the 1 free month if you're new to Yahoo of Awesemo plus Platinum. Adam's deeper dive, it's free. It's on site each and every day for you to read. So make sure you're checking that out across the board with what we're doing here. All right. So we know Jimmy Butler, of course, dealing with injury. We have Paul George on this slate as well. And then the price drops significantly. So if we're talking about paying up, and if this is a stars move here on this slate, it's got to be Paul George first and foremost, especially because of the injury concern with Jimmy Butler.
See, I really like Jimmy Butler.
Okay.
And I think he's going to play. The report that I saw yesterday was that Butler was going to play today. He's still officially questionable, so we need to, make sure that he is going to be in there before, locking him into our lineups. But if he does suit up, Bam is still out, and that's a big deal for Butler. He's up to 1.48 Yahoo points per minute with Bam off the court this season. So I don't think Butler would be limited in his first game back. I mean, we're talking he's missed 3 games. He's the type of guy that kind of just they throw him to the fire. And I would have no qualms against a Grizzlies defense that has been dead last in terms of defensive efficiency this year. So Jimmy Butler, I think, is a very nice play. We have him popping in our boom bust tool as somebody who's going to be under-owned relative to his optimal lineup rate, sort of across the industry. And I feel that way for sure on Yahoo, where we have him projected for 3% ownership. That number might increase once we get some more definitive clarity on his status, but I really like Butler as a sort of contrarian pay up today.
All right. So elsewhere here, I mean, you talk about going up and taking advantage of teams with poor defensive efficiency. Oubre at $21 going up against the Sixers on the wing there. I imagine you can just look at ownership here on site. He is right up there at the top at that position. Do you find yourself equal, maybe a little overweight to the field there with $21 on Yahoo?
I would say I'm a little bit under on Tsunami Poppy. As much as I love this guy, he is a shooting dependent player. He's been on
a tear, Matt.
Yes, but he's a shooting dependent player that's checking in with significant ownership, right? He's coming off of like 37.5 points in his last game, Yahoo points, but all of that came from scoring. He had 28 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 steal. He was 11 for 17 from the field, 6 for 10 from 3. And like you said, he has been red hot shooting the ball. But that is the definition of a player that you want to sell high on. And maybe, I'm not saying that happens today. Maybe Kelly Oubre comes out and he lights it up again. But the time is coming where Kelly Oubre is going to have like a 30% shooting night. And when it comes, he is not a $21 player. So I will be underweight on Kelly Oubre. I'll have some. He's not a hard fade, but I think he's overpriced and overowned at the moment.
All right. So outside of Butler at the top, where are you saving money here at the 3? Are you taking advantage of Dave being out, maybe a bounce back night for Norman Powell?
I think that this is a very good price tag for Norman Powell. So I'm definitely going to be overweight. We have him at 15% projected ownership. But the guy who stands out to me is Derek Jones Jr., and he's priced at the absolute minimum. Chicago is like low key banged up at the moment. You know, they don't have any of their stars out of the lineup, but they have no Kobe White, no Javonte Green. Alex Caruso doubtful. So that's a decent handful of minutes. And Derek Jones Jr. played a very solid handful of minutes in their last game, 32 and a half. He's like a 0.85 type of fantasy producer on a per minute basis. And what you have to like about him is that he's popping as just as good of a value play as some of these other guys in our projections. Right. But we only have Jones projected for about 14% ownership, as opposed to a guy like Dennis Smith Jr., who's close to 50. So I would rather eat the chalk with DJJ than I would pay up for, or, spend down on one of these chalk point guard options.
All right, man, let's keep it moving here. Anybody else real quick on the way out that's worth a mention at the 3? We will move into Giannis territory at the power forward spot.
Yeah, real quick. I think if you wanted to stick with a Hornet, Gordon Hayward to me, he's 26. I like him considering the projected ownership more than I like Kelly Oubre Jr.
Okay, yeah, good counter there, and it's really the difference of $5. So it's not like, it makes sense as far as the leverage you gain by all means. All right, let's look at the 4. We'll end, of course, coming up in a couple of minutes with the center spot. You've got Lofty and Adam coming your way in about 7 minutes or so. And you mentioned there's only one Sixer that you're getting to tonight on the slate. I'm going to safely assume that it's not a guy who's questionable with an illness, right?
No, it's not Tobias. It's not Tobias.
It's
power
all
forward
Giannis all day, right?
Yeah. I mean, Giannis right now, again, he's questionable. So you have to watch his status. But if he's in, there's more than enough value to jam him in. He's somebody that I think I always want to be overweight on when he's going to be a contrarian option. And again, it'll be interesting to see how these ownership numbers update as we get closer to lock time. But right now we have Giannis at 0.4%. That's never the correct play. Giannis always deserves more than 0.4% ownership. So I would imagine if we get confirmation that he is going to play, that number rises. But again, the way I'm constructing it right now, he is, definitely a priority stud for me.
So real quick, I am curious directly with the guy who's sharing the same amount of ownership here, and rightfully so, with what's happening with the question mark of Giannis. Let's just say he doesn't play. We didn't really talk about him in that capacity when we're looking at the 3, but what does that do for you and Chris Middleton? Now, clearly that number is going to change drastically as well for him if Giannis is out.
Yeah, he becomes interesting. The one thing that you have to keep in mind is that this matchup is a tougher one for Milwaukee. Cleveland has basically been a joke for many, many years, but they are really good defensively this year. Evan Mobley makes that much of a difference. So without Giannis, I don't know if this team necessarily is going to be like a strong offensive team, right? We've kind of seen them. We saw them struggle without Giannis versus the Raptors a couple nights ago. They lost 93-97. They followed that up with a win against the Heat. Good win. But I don't think that this is a spot where I would want to load up on their guys.
All right. So let's look at that point here, right? Because if I'm going to pivot away from Giannis who's playing, the ownership's going to bounce up significantly, and I just want to save money. That's one thing. But if Giannis is out on this slate, Evan Mobley, $29, the guy you just mentioned, all of a sudden becomes really appealing.
Yeah, Mobley's an interesting pivot, right? We kind of have Jeremy Grant, who is the exact same salary as Mobley. We have him projected for vastly more ownership. Mobley would be interesting in that case. I mean, he's just a really good player. As I've said before, I was kind of dead wrong on my prospect evaluation of him. That's why I don't work for a front office, thankfully, for 30 NBA teams.
Work for the Knicks. We love that here in Philly, bro.
The guy that I find myself gravitating towards is Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah.
We've talked about him a lot recently with the Grizzlies injury situation. Just a very good basketball player. He didn't have a good game in his last outing against Dallas. Struggled with the fouls, 5 personal fouls limited him to around 29 minutes. You're going to get those types of games from Jackson, but I think that makes him an interesting buy low target today. I think people may overlook him off that one bad performance.
We've got a lot to look at here. A couple of big spend up options and any other cheap pivots here on the center spot. Reminder, it's Lofty and Adam coming your way on the full expanded deeper dive in a matter of minutes. Hit that thumbs up button if you're hanging with us. We appreciate you hanging with us. And also make sure you're subscribed. We've got the DFS, the odds, and the season-long fantasy football channels for you. Tons of content live and on demand. So you mentioned Embiid. We also have Jokic here. And I'm just curious because we haven't talked about anybody on this squad as much as I tried to lure you into the Seth range. But where are you with Embiid to the field and also compared to when you're building compared to Jokic?
I'm over on Embiid comfortably. And I have more Embiid than Jokic by a pretty significant amount. I think, and maybe I'm being lured into the sample size here of just 2 games, but I think Joel Embiid might be back, boys. To go full John Wick on everybody.
Yeah,
man. I'm thinking that I'm back. The usage rate up near 40% in his last game. The minutes were up to 36. He is just a better fantasy player than what this salary indicates. And we kind of have him, if you're paying up in our projections, as the best value among the, super stud tier outside of Jimmy Butler. And I agree with that assessment. I really like Joel Embiid tonight against a soft Hornets team that doesn't really have a center on their roster, right? Like he's going to be facing Nick Richards and PJ Washington. Joel Embiid should dominate those guys. So
easily.
Really like him as a pay up tonight.
Yeah, and look, he's got lost time that's knocked him out of the MVP race. He knows all this, and there's nobody that's trying to gain back lost time faster than Embiid. So there's personal motivation there as well. Is there anybody else as we wind down here, brother? Is there anybody else that you're looking at from a cheaper standpoint? Look, if Giannis is out, we should look at Bobby Portis, $26 there, and what that does as far as his increase.
Yeah, Bobby Portis, always somebody that I have some interest in, but the Boogie Cousins thing has been a little bit of a factor, right? He's siphoning just a couple of minutes away from Portis. I think Washington is interesting tonight, right? Because he's checking in as the highest owned player at the position, over 34%. I don't know if I necessarily want to eat that chalk. I get it. He's been very good recently for the shorthanded Hornets, but this is a matchup that really calls for a true center. And I think Washington, if he's asked to guard Joel Embiid, could find himself in foul trouble, all sorts of different outcomes for him tonight. So while I think the price tag is very fair, the matchup and the ownership kind of pushes me towards some of the other options at the position.
At Matt LaMarca, at Shander Show, we appreciate you guys riding with us out there. Jordan produced, but don't go anywhere. As we mentioned, the real official extended deeper dive coming your way right now with Lofty and Adam. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button, please. If you haven't already, stay put, and we'll see you all on Thursday.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Deeper Dive presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. I'm Dave Loughran at Lafayette_D on Twitter. With me, Adam Scher at Ship My Money DFS, on a tear lately. Absolutely crushing it, man. I just hope you're paying taxes on that because
man, you have no idea how disappointing it was. I went to bed last night. I thought I'd made like $113,000 yesterday. I woke up this morning, found out I had to pay taxes on that shit.
Yeah,
like, thank God for Twitter, man, just saving me.
Unbelievable. I mean, yeah, you should actually thank that guy for tagging the IRS on Twitter. It's amazing too, because I wonder what would that guy is. Just all he does is spew vitriol. By the way, it's like he hunts people down that win and tells them why they're idiots.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I don't really have many standards on Twitter because I generally think it's a cesspool, and I definitely play to that and just use it to screw around mostly. But you've got to have something better to do than anonymously just talk shit about nothing.
It's great. And think, look, I've always said when people are like, if I had 150, that's always right. If I had 100, take out a loan, dude. Like if it's auto cash, like instant bink, why wouldn't you take out a $20,000 loan and pay it back the next day?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you could do that. Or, if you really wanted to work a little bit, you could just max out the low stakes for, a couple months. And
exactly. Right. But I'm saying, why not just go all out?
Right. Yeah. There's no reason, not to max out all of your credit cards, your home equity line, whatever loans you can get.
Refinance the house. Dude. Yeah. Take out all the equity on the house. Yeah.
Play 150 lineups every day.
Yeah. You guys should do that. No, I'm kidding. But happy to have you with us. As always, we got an interesting show today, 10 games, a lot of big players out. Obviously a couple. Yeah, right, Larry. That's what Adam was saying as well. But a lot of, or at least a decent amount of big name players out, some of them questionable. When you're researching this slate though, man, I know a couple of these guys, this isn't their first game out, right? Like LaMelo and Dame. So we have a decent interpretation of what rotations could look like. But then you've got like Anthony Simons out as well in that backcourt for Portland. That's a late game. There's no doubt a lot of big plays here and big news that we're waiting on still going in the 7:00 lock.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have Milwaukee, who has been a nightmare lately from an injury standpoint, but they still have Giannis questionable, George Hill questionable, Grayson Allen questionable. Also, keep in mind that last game, we didn't even have Grayson Allen as questionable, and he was out. 2 games ago, we didn't even have Giannis as questionable, and he was out. So they are just kind of screwing around in general. You have Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell and Patrick Beverley questionable for Minnesota. Jimmy Butler questionable for Miami. There are a ton of moving parts on this slate. They're going to change a lot because not only does it affect the players on that team, but it relatively affects all the other pieces on the slate as well.
Caleb says, bro, you think the guys trolling you on Twitter own homes? How do you refinance your mom's basement? Fair. Very, very fair point. Hey, let's dive into this, but hit that thumbs up before we do. If you're just joining us now or you're sticking around after the pre-show, the pre-Yahoo show, doesn't matter. We're glad you're here, breaking down 10 games, of course. So let's get it. What do we got? 58 to 200. That's all we need. 58. We got 826 people watching as you guys come in right now. And well, I don't know. Let's have a good show. Oh, and help us get to 70,000 subscribers. We're at 67,600. Thanks to you guys, biggest DFS channel out there by a considerable margin right now. So we must be doing something right. If you like the free content and all that good stuff, show us some love here. Only takes a second. And combat those YouTube overlords. We got to feed the algorithm. Fucking with us lately, man. Killing our streams and all this stuff. No, that's probably on us. But anyway, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you want to join, hit join down below the thumbs up. Get the custom emojis, the badges, the shout outs, of course, the priority questions, and free super chat every month as well. All right, Adam, first question that I always ask you from a lineup construction standpoint, what are we looking at today?
So one thing just to mention really quickly, Christopher Hooks in chat said, how do you build with so many moving parts? And I didn't mean it in a sarcastic way. I said, wait till there are less moving parts. Obviously, you have to have something in by lock, but there's really just no point to be, unless you just absolutely have to. There's no reason to be building lineups right now. Just take in the information, build during live before lock. We'll probably have more information by then. As far as the overview of the slate, this slate seems a little bit more stars and scrubby than normal. And the reason I said this morning with Josh is that at least on DraftKings, there's a lot of guys that would normally be like 3,900, 4K are just like 3,200 or 3K. And it's not that they are necessarily really good plays. There's just like an abundance of people, though, that chances are one or two or three of them have big games. So it makes me think it's a little bit more stars and scrubby. That could change, though, if, for example, like Towns and Russell get ruled out. Edwards goes from being like a correctly priced mid-range play to a fantastic mid-range play. Kind of the same thing with Milwaukee. Drew and Middleton look better if Giannis is out. But I think this slate to me just looked like the pricing is a little bit sharper for most of the mid-range guys, a little bit looser for the top end guys, and more so for the really cheap pieces. Again, on DraftKings, they also just completely screwed up pricing on Charlotte. So that makes it a little more stars and scrubby as well.
Yeah. And not just stars and scrubby, but like 50% Ish Smith stars and scrubby.
Yeah, just kind of completely broke the pricing, and I don't really have anything to do like to get away from it. Stars and scrubby.
Yeah, we legitimately haven't projected at 50% right now.
Might be low.
You think so?
I mean, he was, granted, it was a 3-game slate yesterday, but he was like 50% owned at 4,800. So not saying that his ownership, not saying 50% ownership projection might be low, saying that he might be under owned at 50%.
Hold on. I didn't play NBA yesterday. I don't play on Sundays. He was 48 yesterday and he's 34 today.
Ish Smith dropped 1,400 from yesterday. Cody Martin, whichever one. Yeah. Cody Martin dropped 1,000 from yesterday.
What?
Yeah. I don't know what happened.
And I mean, these guys are all in the COVID protocol. So it's not like there was any anticipation that they would be returning.
No, they just, somebody, I was joking about it on Twitter. Somebody was like, the weekend guys forgot to hit save on the pricing. And that's like literally what it is.
Might be. DraftKings has been a lot better with that lately too. But
I told Josh today. So like I was kind of rushing because I had NFL sweats yesterday and I got a late start on NBA. So I hadn't actually looked at the pricing. I just like did my projections, made my lineups, whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, it makes sense that I have, like 90% Ish Smith. And then it was actually when he started out slowly, I was like, whoa, he's 4,800. Like that's actually like a semi-legitimate price tag. And then today he's 3,400. So I don't know what they're doing.
Larry says, I hate to say lock, but is Ish close to a lock today?
As close as it gets.
Yeah, he's the closest again. 3,400 point guard position. Primary ball handler against the Philly backcourt defense that's nowhere as good as they were before, no doubt. Let's dive into that game then. Philly and Charlotte. It's the first one up on the docket here. We'll get to Charlotte in a second, but let's kick it off with Philly. Do you have Tobias in right now? He's currently questionable.
Yeah, I have him in right now.
Okay. So okay. Let's talk about Tobias or Embiid at the top then. He's $11,000 on DraftKings, and across the rest of the board here, you've got Embiid at you got Embiid. What's he at on Yahoo? 47. Okay, so you're going to be paying a premium for him, no doubt. If Tobias does sit, just to kick it off there, you're looking at a rest of the team that's got like Tyrese Maxey and a spot up 3-point shooter and Seth Curry. What does that do for Embiid? Obviously we can talk about Embiid with Tobias, but what does it do if Tobias ends up sitting?
If Tobias ends up sitting, I think it ends up giving you kind of a wide range of outcomes on Embiid. This season, he's played 155 minutes without Harris on the floor. He's been very productive. He's averaged 1.43 DraftKings points per minute. He has a 35% usage rate. The problem with that is while that's really productive, he's $300 less than Nikola Jokic, who by comparison, without Michael Porter Jr. on the floor this year, has averaged 1.85 DraftKings points per minute. So you have two guys that are going to play similar minutes. Yes, Embiid's in a very good matchup, but 0.4 DraftKings points per minute over 34 minutes is a lot in terms of what you expect guys to do. But if you go and look since the start of last season without Simmons or Tobias Harris on the floor, Embiid's played a total of 323 minutes. He's averaged 1.77 DraftKings points per minute with a 41.7% usage rate. So going back to last year, he produces at a similar rate to Jokic. This year, it hasn't been there. But if you believe that he was kind of banged up earlier in the season, maybe he's getting a little bit healthier now. There's kind of just a higher ceiling than we've seen so far. So I do think he's a good option, particularly if Harris is out. I don't think Charlotte really has any sort of answer in the front court individually. Certainly they can throw double teams at him and all of that, but it's just a really, really good spot for him in a fast-paced game. The only issue I have is that right now he is projected for 17% ownership on DraftKings. By comparison, Jokic is at 10%. I don't know if that holds, but if it does, it makes absolutely no sense to me.
Thank you, Big Show, for the super chat. Avi says, I got to go. Can you guys answer my super chat? So yeah, let me hit on that real quick. Adam, and thanks, Avi. He says, FanDuel in mind for these. If Hayward goes off, who does that take production from? Can Nurkic get to 50 fantasy points in any scenario tonight? So two-part question unrelated to each other.
If Hayward goes off, it probably takes production from Oubre, maybe Bridges, but you've seen Bridges do just a lot in the way of creating and stuff, whereas Oubre, I think, would be hurt more if, like, assuming Hayward going off means Hayward scores a ton of points. My guess is Oubre would be the most impacted, at least relative to salary. As far as Nurkic getting 50, it's a greater than 0% chance, but it's not a particularly high probability at all.
All right, Big Show, had a great day. I say thank you guys for the info and tools. Thanks for the super chat, man. And congrats on the big day. What else are you doing with Philly?
So if Harris is in, I think that, one, that's a downgrade to Embiid. Embiid would still be fine in tournaments. You know, I still don't think Charlotte has an answer for him, but it would be a downgrade. Harris himself would look pretty good. He's only 7,800 or 7,900 on DraftKings. He'd likely play 33, 34 minutes against a fast-paced Charlotte team that is missing guys and not very good defensively ever. So Harris would look better, but not much really stands out elsewhere. Curry, Maxey, you know, none of those guys look great on a 10-game slate where there is a lot of value today. If Harris is out, you know, it makes guys like Maxey and Curry look a little bit better. It makes Niang at 4,100, assuming he starts, look better. But pretty big news on Harris as far as, you know, how many guys from Philly you want to get to.
If Harris is out, how many Philly guys are you willing to get to?
I mean, I'm willing to get to 3. I think most lineups I would get to 1 or 2, if any.
Okay. Let's flip it to the other side of this one. We already talked about the absurd pricing right now on this Charlotte Hornets team. They're 6.5-point dogs at home. They're missing LaMelo. They're missing Plumlee. They're missing a lot of guys, but those are the two big ones, along with Terry Rozier. Jalen McDaniels also out. When you take LaMelo off the floor this season, right? I know we can work into different scenarios here with all of these guys off, but is there anyone that really shows a massive improvement? All right, let me take Rozier off too. I'm sure you already have the numbers pulled up, but I don't know how many minutes these guys have played without him. Okay, so Ish has played 189 minutes without both of them this year, 22% usage rate. That's not bad. Assist rate of 26%. So with those type of numbers and 0.87 fantasy points per minute, but at 3,400, if you're projecting him for around 30 minutes, like you said a minute ago, closest thing there is to a lock at that price point, I don't really think we even need to dig into it unless you want to talk about any alternatives here that could potentially be a good pivot with him being 50+% owned.
No, I mean, that's kind of the thing, and that's why I think it's as close to a lock as you can get. I talked about it with Josh this morning on the NBA show. I talked about it relative to the NFL slate earlier with Eric on the football recap show. But one of the big things when, you know, people are always just like, oh, need to pivot away from the chalk. But one of the big things that comes into play is what can you do in that price range, you know, or do you have to remake your entire lineup? And the reason that guys at 3,400 like Ish Smith end up becoming guys that typically I just jam into lineups even when they're popular is there's not a whole lot around them that look remotely similar. That's not to say that there aren't other, you know, sub $3,500 guys that have paths to success here in, you know, on the slate, but none of them are starting at point guard and likely to play 32 to 34 minutes. And it's not like Ish Smith's a bad fantasy producer either. You know, like you said, 0.87 DraftKings points per minute without Ball and Rozier this year. He had success in Washington in the past. He's never been a bad fantasy option. He's good at getting assists. He can score a bit. So, and by the way, his 0.87 DraftKings points per minute is on 44.9% true shooting. So it's not like he's shot efficiently either. So there's just nobody really in his price range that you can even point to and say, oh yeah, I think that they have a similar chance of scoring 40 fantasy points as Smith does. It just doesn't exist. It makes him like Sony Michel yesterday, you know, in NFL. So it's just really difficult to get away because you kind of would have to get out of that price range. And if you get out of that price range, that's fine. You know, if Smith, let's say, gets like 18 raw points, then you're in good shape. But the problem is you're effectively just like playing with a lower salary cap than everybody else. If you just say, okay, well, I'm going to just play, no guards below 5K. Like, okay, great. But you're handicapping yourself for no real reason.
If you were to tell me you could get a guy, if you had a 22% usage guy, 26% assist rate, like you said, 0.87 fantasy points per minute, but shooting poorly and under 200 minutes. And then like the best player on the team outside of you is a Gordon Hayward. Normally DraftKings would have him priced at least 5,000 if you're giving them 30 plus minutes per game.
Yeah, exactly. Like if Smith should be where Dennis Smith Jr. is, we'll talk about this later, obviously. Dennis Smith Jr. is underpriced tonight, but there's at least ways he can fail at 5,300. There are other players in his price range that are capable of having, that are legitimately capable of going for 35, 40 fantasy points. At least there you have to make a decision. Like if you were 50% owned, it would be like, okay, I'll take my chances. Hopefully Smith scores 25 and I can just like pass half the field. But at 3,400, it's just, the combination of what it opens up and the likelihood that he 10Xs. I mean, his median projection is what, like 8 to 9X. He's just kind of in a category by himself.
He's got to have an absurd boom score as well. I haven't looked at it yet, but it's got to be ridiculous for this slate. It's at, 55%.
Yeah.
Bust probability, 6.9%. That's our boom bust tool at Awesemo. Crazy. That's absurd. The next closest bust score is 16%. That's Dennis Smith. So it goes to what you're saying. Like, yeah, Dennis Smith's underpriced, Dennis Smith Jr., but it's not even close to ish. So what about Miles Bridges, PJ Washington? Of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 highest owned play? This is insane on DraftKings right now. 5 of the 6 are from the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, complete mispricing here. Smith, I think, is the one that's the safest, and that's reflected. He's getting twice as much ownership as the other guys. Like, I could at least give you a scenario where everyone else either fails or just isn't optimal. Smith, I just really don't have it unless he gets hurt. Oubre at 5,800 should play a ton of minutes. He looks really, really good. He's the second highest owned guy on DraftKings. Cody Martin played about 32 minutes off the bench yesterday. I expect similar playing time from him. But at least when you're talking about somebody coming off the bench, things could go wrong. Maybe Book Knight plays more. Maybe they just run weird rotations where like Nick Richards plays more and PJ Washington plays at the 4 and everybody moves up. I don't think any of these are likely, but at least when somebody's coming off the bench, you have some element of risk about when they're going to get on the floor. Miles Bridges at 7,700 looks really good, but there are other players in that price tag, in that price range, that give you a similar range of outcomes. PJ Washington at 5,700, likely to come off the bench, kind of goes into the same thing I was talking about with Martin. Washington looks great. He played 38 minutes off the bench yesterday. We've seen Richards start a couple of games ahead of Washington recently, and both times he's basically played a stint to open the first quarter, a stint to open the third quarter, and not stepped on the floor again. Now maybe Charlotte's just like, oh, Joel Embiid, we're going to throw Richards out there for 24 minutes, and Washington really underwhelms. I don't think that's really likely, but it could happen. So I think that, those 4 guys, Oubre, Martin, Bridges, Washington, all look great. They just aren't on the same level as Smith, and that's reflected in the ownership, but they still look really good. So you're still going to want to get to these guys. It just comes down to paying attention to, your entire lineup and the total ownership in your lineup. And, if you have super contrarian plays elsewhere, then feel a little bit more free to get to more Charlotte guys. If you have chalkier pieces elsewhere, then maybe pivot off of, Bridges in that lineup or whatever.
We had a good question. Is there any pending news that would make someone else in Ish's range a good pivot? I don't know. Like if D'Angelo Russell's out and Pat Bev's out, what are you looking like a Leandro Balmaro or something like that? But I would assume Beasley benefits most from that anyway, and he's $1,000 more expensive.
Right. I was going to say, like, Beasley ends up looking like a really good value, but he's still, $1,000 more.
4,400.
So,
yeah.
Right. So, I don't think, unless there's just like news that comes that we're not expecting at all. I don't think anybody really shows up, because the thing is, it's not just the minutes. It's that Ish Smith is a good fantasy producer too. And that's what separates him from, say, Aaron Holiday. We haven't talked about Washington yet, but assuming he's going to start in place of Spencer Dinwiddie, he offers value because he's really, really cheap and the minutes are there, but he's still playing alongside Bradley Beal, and he's probably like a 0.65 to 0.7 fantasy point per minute guy. So, and then he's also, competing with somebody like Howell Neto, who could take minutes. Whereas Smith is just like, no, he's he's the guy because Rozier, everybody that would take minutes from him is not playing tonight.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a lot of guys that might be viewed as really good plays on other slates as value spots. That might not be the case.
Wait, Ish is out? Is chat?
Aaron Holiday looks pretty good, huh?
Book night looks pretty good.
Aaron Holiday, 0.7 DraftKings points per minute in just under 100 minutes played with Bradley Beal and without Dinwiddie. So, all right. Well, I don't know how we're going to get through this slate in time. We're going to have to cruise through some other games, but we have to listen. Live Before Lock with Josh and Greg comes up next. Let's try. Let's try and break this down. So there's no LaMelo, there's no Rozier, there's no Plumlee, there's no McDaniels, there's no Ish Smith. Now I'm waiting to see if we get any other news that someone else gets thrown into the protocol. Adam, that's the other problem here. Like, I don't know. Who's it going to be now?
Yeah, that's so. I mean, I don't know who replaces him in the starting lineup. I don't know if they go to Book Night. I don't know. They could go to Cody Martin. Martin would be my guess, and you just have like Hayward or Oubre or even Bridges basically running point. I thought Book Night would play more yesterday than he did, so I'm kind of trying to at least be somewhat pessimistic about his playing time now. But I really just don't know what else they can do. Like they don't have other ball handlers they can go to. You have Richards, you have Thor. Those are both front court guys. I don't really know what else they can do other than give more minutes to Book Night here. Maybe Cody Martin starts and plays a ton. You probably get like 40 minutes from Oubre too. But
like with Ish off the floor last game, you had Bridges, Hayward, Martin, Washington, and Thor at times, and Book Night played 6 minutes in place of Ish Smith in the second quarter.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I thought, like I said, I thought Book Night would play more last night than he did, but I also, when you take Ish Smith's 32 minutes out, I don't really know what alternative there is other than Book Night playing enough minutes to look good at 3K tonight.
And it's James Borrego.
Yeah. I mean, if Book Night doesn't end up looking like one of the best values, then kind of what they have to do is give more minutes to Richards, give more minutes to Thor. PJ Washington gets more minutes at the 4. Bridges is playing the 3. Hayward's playing, I guess, the 1, and like Cody Martin's playing the 2. I guess they could do that, but I don't really feel confident in that either.
Yeah, Hayward's starting at the point, man.
Right. But but it comes in, unless they're going to give Richards and Thor a bunch of minutes, Book Night still has to play a lot.
All right. So here's the thing. Let's move on. Live Before Lock will cover this when we get a starting lineup. That's going to change a lot, given that this is a 7:00 game. It's a 7 p.m. lock. That'll make things a little bit easier. But wow, that changes a ton. So
somebody said Ish still projects as a good value. Not far off.
Yeah, seriously. OKC and Detroit. And if there are games, Adam, that we're not particularly impressed by, we're going to have to cruise through some of these because
there's a lot of them.
Yeah, I want to get to all the good stuff. I feel like this game between OKC and Detroit certainly poses one of those. We don't have to talk a ton about the OKC side of things. So let's start there. Oklahoma City Thunder, 3-point dogs against the Pistons team that is also bad. 205.5 total in Detroit.
Yeah, this game just looks like an absolute dumpster fire. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander went from being out to in, which makes most guys on OKC not really look appealing. Like you can still get to Gilgeous-Alexander, you can get to Giddey in tournaments, but there's just so much value on this slate. And, even more so now that it just looks even more like I'm going to just want to go stars and scrubs. So I think it's gonna be tough to get to those guys. I'm not really interested in Dort, Baisley, Robinson, Earl. If you're playing 150 lineups, maybe you get a little bit because the matchup's good, but SGA coming back in, it takes usage away from everybody. It takes minutes away from some of the, pieces like Trey Mann that we were looking at earlier. It just makes this team pretty unappealing.
What about the other side with Detroit?
They are, I think, a little bit more interesting to get to. The pricing is just more favorable. There's not one individual guy that stands out, but Cade Cunningham, Jeremy Grant, Sadiq Bey, all I think are reasonably priced. Isaiah Stewart as well, but there are just a ton of good center options today that, kind of keep expectations in check there. To me, the most, I guess I shouldn't say most interesting because Grant, Cunningham, and Bay all obviously are better. But you do have some cheap options on Detroit that if they are going to be low owned are kind of interesting to me in large field tournaments, because it's not that they're particularly likely to have success, but it seems like they're just a little bit underrepresented as far as where we think the field's going to be at. Frank Jackson at 3,600 is projected for 2% ownership. Saban Lee's projected for sub 1%. Josh Jackson at 3K flat is projected for sub 1% ownership on DraftKings right now. I'm not particularly confident in any one of those guys, but you have no Amadou Diallo. You have no Corey Joseph. So you're taking a bunch of minutes out of the rotation. Frank Jackson's been playing a good amount anyway. Josh Jackson hasn't been, but now all those minutes are available. Saban Lee hasn't been, but you have those minutes available. I think it's likely that you get 18 to 20 minutes split up between Lee and Josh Jackson. So as long as they're low owned, I kind of like taking shots there against a terrible OKC team. If that ownership were to come up, I will gladly move away because I have no actual confidence in these guys.
It's actually remarkable how bad the offenses on these teams are. They're 30th and 29th in the league this year. It's not good, but I guess that doesn't really matter if you're somebody like Cade and you're playing for that ceiling game, kind of like what you're talking about at low ownership. Because it doesn't, if you're bad, that's one thing. But if Cade's getting all of the opportunities and he's playing good enough minutes, and he's also playing against a bad defense in OKC, this is kind of what we advocate for, right? Like if he gets those 34 minutes that you're hoping, the upside is there. The ceiling game is certainly there, even if overall it's an ugly kind of plodding, low scoring game.
Yeah, exactly. He's still a fantasy point per minute guy this year. He's got a 25.5% usage rate, 26% assist percentage. Lou Dort could cause him some problems, but outside of that, you're not really worried about too much from OKC. So yeah, like the ceiling is still there. I just think he's correctly priced as well.
Anything else for Detroit?
No, just a lot of guys in play. No one guy standing out is a great option, I don't think.
All right, let's talk about the Wizards then. No Spencer Dinwiddie, as Chat alluded to earlier. He's out on the second of a back-to-back. They're 5.5-point road dogs, 211.5 total here. Let's actually kick this off. We'll go to Aaron Holiday in a second, but let's kick it off with Beal. He's still not getting much ownership at all. Is this somewhere that you think you could see yourself pivoting to, just given that Dinwiddie's out and they don't really have any other considerable shooters outside of once in a while Kyle Kuzma? Or are you mostly down on this Washington team? And we didn't update ownership yet. I'm assuming that's in the process with the Ish Smith news just dropping.
So mostly down on Washington. I do think that Beal is interesting at 6.5% ownership right now at 8,800. I'm assuming that probably comes down even a little bit more now that actually it probably stays about the same because you're just going to have it kind of spread out among Charlotte guys, but he's getting cheaper. The concern that I have is he's played well in the 3 games he's played without Dinwiddie this year, but you haven't seen much of a bump in his rates. It's just been that he's producing at a better clip. That's something that concerns me as the sample gets larger. He's played 397 total minutes without Dinwiddie on the floor this year, 31.1% usage rate, 31.5% assist percentage. Those numbers are good. He's likely to play 35, 36 minutes here. I think he looks like a good option in tournaments, but I don't see it as a situation where he gets like a massive bump and goes from being not really playable to like, a lock or anything close to that. But it's more so he just has a little bit. He projects a little bit higher here. His ceiling gets a little bit higher without Dinwiddie. If nobody else is going to roster him, there's some appeal, but still just kind of a secondary play for me.
What about Aaron Holiday?
I mean, 3,100 is a good price tag. The issue is that, for one, he could not play a ton of minutes. He has started 3 games without Dinwiddie and with Beal this year. He's played 24.4 minutes per game. He's averaged 0.55 DraftKings points per minute. Overall, without Dinwiddie on the floor, he's averaged 0.7 DraftKings points per minute this season. He has played 91 minutes alongside Beal without Dinwiddie, 0.7 DraftKings points per minute there as well. So, I mean, if he gets to 30 minutes, he's a good point per dollar value. The issue is just with all of the stuff that is open and is opening up on the slate, being a good point per dollar value doesn't necessarily get it done. If you score 20 raw points, it doesn't matter what your salary is tonight. You're probably not doing anything to contribute to a winning lineup in tournaments. So that's kind of the big issue. Right now, he's projected for 3% ownership. That's pretty appealing. There's a pretty good chance that comes up with Smith being out, though.
So someone asked about Kuzma. 19% usage rate with Dinwiddie off the floor and Beal on the floor this year. Kuzma's played over 75% of his minutes alongside Bradley Beal to begin with. So maybe some slight staggering there, but not a considerable amount. He's not pulling a lot of ownership. The one player that's pulling the most ownership on this team is Montrezl Harrell, and he's barely cracking 10%.
Yeah, I think the center spot is typically the most appealing spot from Washington. The problem is just the opportunity cost of the position as well. 5,200 on DraftKings for Harrell, 4,900 for Gafford. On average, they're going to play around 24 minutes apiece, but you get some games where, whether it's foul trouble or foul related or performance related, Harrell can get to 30 minutes, Gafford can get to 26 minutes or 27 minutes. So there is an upside for both of these guys. Certainly don't play them together. They mostly look good if they're low owned. Harrell's getting a little bit of ownership on DraftKings at 10%. Gafford's only at 3%.
Do you have any thoughts on Kuzma or anybody else in this offense or on this team?
No.
All right. Yahoo Fantasy. This is for you, Butthole Jenkins, who asked about this. Sure, that was 100% sincere. Yahoo's Fantasy, sponsor of the Deeper Dive, Live Before Lock, all of this wonderful stuff, even the Yahoo Pre-Lock show that happened earlier today, because we got Live Before Lock coming up for football as well later in the day. 25, 30 mile per hour sustained winds for Bills and Patriots. Keep that in mind when you're watching the show and building lineups tonight. But listen, if you haven't played at Yahoo yet, there's a lot of reasons you should. First of all, the management fee, rake in other spots, in case you were wondering what that is considerably lower. Like yesterday, the $1 Million Baller, minus 25% management fee. They just have an insane amount of contest with very, very low management fees, negative ones, guaranteed overlay in so many different spots. Tonight, you got the 30K NBA baller. For NFL, you've got the 15K to first, 150K Monday Night Football baller. It's insane, Adam, by the way, how big showdown slates are for football still, even with basketball.
Yeah, it's great. Alex almost took down the big contest last night for 300K.
Would have been twice in like 2 weeks.
Yeah. I got third in like the secondary semi kind of big contest last night, but nowhere close to what Alex came very close to bringing home.
Yeah, just crushing it lately, both of you guys. But at Yahoo, if you haven't done so yet, don't just go and sign up. Use the link in the description, or the one that that Jordan Klein producing today's show is about to throw into chat for you, because all you have to do is sign up, use the deposit $10 or more if you want, but only $10, and enter a paid contest. After you enter that contest, Yahoo will email us with your information, your email, not like your social security and all that stuff. And we will email you, get you set up with a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. It's a $90 value, everything on the site, ownership, player projections, top stack, boom bust tool, lineup builder, everything for every sport, not just basketball, not just football, every single sport out there, all of them compatible with Yahoo, equipped with the best Yahoo tools that you're going to find out there to win there. And if that's not enough, Yahoo gives you $10 in free credits when you sign up. So you're getting this free. You're playing on a good site with super low management fees, some very big contests, and you're also getting a $90 Awesemo Plus Platinum free for the entire month. If you haven't done it, take the opportunity to do so. It won't be here forever. And it's literally free money. It's a free subscription that has helped, I don't know, a lot of people win a lot of money recently, as you'll see in the Hall of Fame segment later. So check it out, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Use the link in the description or in the chat. Very simple. Sign up, deposit $10, enter a contest, paid contest, and we'll be hitting you up and getting you set up for sure. All right, let's talk about the next one up. Or no, I'm sorry, Indiana. I forgot about the Pacers on the other side of this one. What do you want to do with them?
So from the Indiana side, I think this is another team that just looks pretty good across the board. FanDuel, they are more favorably priced than they are on DraftKings, but you just have a bunch of guys that are playing a ton of minutes because McConnell is out. Justin Holiday is out. So you have Chris Duarte, 4,700 on DraftKings, coming off of a game where he played 36.5 minutes. He's not likely to do a whole lot because he still has to share the ball with Brogdon, Sabonis, and LeVert. But just being on the floor for that many minutes at that price makes you look like a reasonable value. Karis LeVert played 37.5 minutes last game. We've seen his minutes trend up recently in general, where you can expect him to play 34 minutes or so if this game's competitive. He's around a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy, playing with Sabonis and Brogdon, so there's still some value there. Miles Turner, we know has a really high ceiling. He's averaging between 4.5 and 5 blocks per 100 possessions this year. That's, very, very, it gives him a very high ceiling. It adds some volatility to his game. He's only 5,900 on DraftKings. Brogdon and Sabonis both likely to play a lot of minutes. They're more expensive, but they look good as well. So I think any of the 5 Indiana starters look pretty good. If you wanted to roll the dice and try and get into the bench, Brissett at 3K has a path to success on DraftKings, but I don't really think it's to be that necessary on this slate.
Okay. Someone asked if they're going to do the same with Sabonis, putting him off the bench. That was a family matter he was dealing with, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I can't imagine Sabonis would want to come off, or they'd want Sabonis. He still played 37 minutes in the game. So yeah. All right. Memphis and Miami Heat. Memphis Grizzlies are 4.5 point dogs. Against the Heat. So 214 total in Miami. We know that Bam's out for a considerable amount of time, but Jimmy Butler's also questionable. This is a pretty big piece of news that we got to keep our eye on for sure.
Yeah, one of the bigger pieces we're still waiting on right now, because we know that Bam is out, but this is kind of like a two-way thing where if Butler is in, assuming he's not limited, he looks really, really good because he's been absolutely fantastic without Bam, both this year and going back to last year. Usage rate goes up, per minute production skyrockets. So if he's in, he looks good at, as a small forward option. If he's out, well, if Butler is in, then guys like Lowry and Hero look good, but not like standout plays on this particular slate. If Butler is out, then you still have Lowry with a 38% assist percentage and a 21% usage rate without Butler or Bam. Hero's got a 31.5% usage rate. Both guys averaging between 1 and 1.1 fantasy points per minute and locked into huge minutes. So they both would look really good if Butler's out. They look okay. If Butler is in, Butler himself looks really good if he's in.
Do you like anything else for Miami?
Dedmon, I think, is still a solid option. He's 5K on DraftKings. He's around a point per minute guy. It's just a matter of, how many minutes is he going to play? But excluding his first start where he was in massive foul trouble against, I think it was Memphis, he has averaged about 26.5 minutes per game in his other 5 starts. We've seen him get as high as 31. He's been held back by blowouts in a couple. So I think my best guess at Dedmon is something like 28 minutes. You're getting, around the fantasy point per minute. He kind of ranges anywhere from like 24 to 32, but he's still a good value. You just have to weight him against the other options at the position as well.
All right, let's talk about Memphis. Down Morant for a while now. Kyle Anderson still out, and essentially this team led by, at this point, Jaren Jackson and Dylan Brooks. Are you getting to anything at the top of this team? Like, is there anything that stands out to you, or are these all kind of secondary players like Tyus and Brooks and Jaren Jackson today?
Yeah, pretty much secondary players. Jaren Jackson's playing time has been pretty appealing lately. He only played about 30 minutes last game, but he dealt with some foul trouble in the fourth quarter. You've seen him, get those 32 to 34 minute games a little bit more frequently of late than he was early in the year. He also gets a bump in usage and just production in general without John Morant. So he still looks really good at 7,200. Tyus Jones actually looks better now than he did 20 minutes ago because you're not basically just allocating one guard spot to Ish Smith in every lineup. So it's a situation where Jones is a good value option. It was just, earlier when you basically had a $3,400 free square, it made it more difficult to get to him. In our most recent ownership update, we have Jones at 12.5% ownership on DraftKings, which I think is very reasonable. For comparison, Dennis Smith Jr., who's $300 less expensive, is 22.5%. So you get a nice gap there. Jones is a 0.9 to 1 fantasy point per minute guy going back to last year when he started without Morant. He just looks like a pretty solid option here. Beyond that, any of Brooks, Payne, Melton, Adams still have paths to success. The bench is pretty dicey because on the one hand, especially if Zaire Williams is out, because we know Clark is doubtful. We know that Anderson is out. So on the one hand, you have someone like a $3,300 Aldama, who a couple of games ago was a slate winner at virtually no ownership. We had seen him be one of the first guys off the bench 2 games in a row. But then last game, you had John Conchard sub in ahead of Aldama. You had Xavier Tillman play 20 minutes. Aldama only played like 12 or 14. So there is risk in going to any of these Memphis guys. But at the same time, if you happen to guess right, if you get 20 plus minutes from Tillman, or if you get 22 minutes from Aldama, there is still some value there. It's just very, very risky.
So if you're looking at the Denver Nuggets, who you just talked about earlier when we were discussing Joel Embiid, the highest per minute fantasy producer this season, DraftKings points per minute, is Jokic, 1.77, followed by Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's questionable today. I mean, at this point, man, there's just nobody better. When they're healthy, there's nobody better right now that's going to get the minutes, that is playing without several of their top players. And, Jamal Murray, who hasn't stepped on the court this season, Michael Porter Jr. done for the year. I know he's expensive. There's no doubt about that. He's very expensive, but there isn't a better fantasy producer in the league given their current situation than
Jokic.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. He's great. Like his production's come down a little bit. He's 1.85 DraftKings points per minute without Porter now, but that's in line with what he's done since last year. When you take Murray and Porter off the floor, he's the best. Like Giannis is really close. Embiid, if you go back to the start of last year without Harris and Simmons, is really close, but Jokic is the number one guy.
So if we're factoring price into all of this, which you kind of have to, $12,000 on DK, you're not going to get him at a cheap price point pretty much anywhere. On FanDuel, Jokic is 10.9, which really isn't that absurd. And on Yahoo, he's $54. Where do we go with him tonight in a matchup against the Chicago Bulls, which should be competitive? They're 3.5 point dogs, respectable 217 total.
I'd love to get to Jokic. I actually think it might be a little bit more difficult now with Smith being ruled out, depending on what we get from the Hornets in terms of a starting lineup. Like if you get Bouknight in the starting lineup, you can basically just say like, okay, Ish Smith becomes Bouknight. But if Bouknight's not in the starting lineup, then you have the issue of like, even though Martin is cheap, he's more expensive than Smith. It might just make it so like the really cheap value isn't quite as appealing as it was before. So it might make it a little bit more difficult to get to Jokic, and you have to factor in the opportunity cost of the position as well, because it's not just, is Jokic going to do well? Because I think the answer is pretty much always yes. But if Jokic were to get like 60 DraftKings points, there's a pretty good chance there's a couple mid-range centers that go for 50, 52 and kind of make Jokic useless. So you kind of need that like 70-point game, especially if pricing is a little bit tighter. So I think Jokic is great. I would like to get to him quite a bit, but it's also kind of going to depend on how exactly value shapes out elsewhere.
So we'll come back to this in a second. Tyrese Maxey was just ruled out.
NBA went from being, and so is DeMar DeRozan. Yeah, NBA went from being like really good with this whole injury reporting thing to really bad basically overnight.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm surprised we haven't gotten Tobias Harris news. That could be a legitimate game time decision given that Maxey was just ruled out, right? You would think we get both of them. Maybe we'll get that soon. I mean, you're not starting Seth at the point. You're not. Does Shake have to start here?
I think
he has to, right? Who
else?
Well,
he doesn't have to, but I think he does.
Well, who else would?
Seth.
So then what? Your starting rotation is. I don't think you can start Seth. I mean,
you can. I don't think that they will.
Well, of course you can. You could start Embiid at the point if you want to. I'm saying
no, but I mean, like, I'm saying, no, I mean, but I mean, like, they could have Curry handle the ball, and you just have a lineup where it's like Curry, like, let's say Harris is in, right? So you're not worried about losing too much offensively. You could just keep Milton with the second unit. You have Curry, Green, Thibault, Harris, Embiid, or Curry, Green, Korkmaz, or Niang, whatever, Harris, Embiid.
Yeah,
but like I don't think that's the most likely.
I'd be pretty surprised if it wasn't Shake, but we'll see.
I think Shake.
I think he benefits considerably anyway. Like, forget about who starts here. Tyrese Maxey is a guy that's playing big minutes nightly, so 32 plus minutes every night. How much Shake's for? Shake's not that expensive against the banged up Charlotte team with a bunch of subs in there.
Yeah, no, he looks very good at 4K. I mean, we know he's a good per minute producer. Now it's just he's got a lot more minutes.
Yeah, I think Shake becomes a very good play today. Definitely. So we'll see if he starts or not. I'm assuming he will. Maybe it's Seth. I don't know. What if Seth starts at the point?
I mean, I think he looks a little bit better regardless, but it still also depends on Harris because like if Harris is out and Maxey is out, you basically are just competing with Embiid for, offensive opportunities, and Curry would look better. Like Curry was going to look better even if Harris was out and Maxey was in. Now you take Maxey out too. There's more playmaking available for him. If Harris is in and Curry starts at the point, he looks better than if he doesn't start at the point, but it's still not quite as good as if Harris is out.
Dude, there's going to be a lot of people out there where their entire lineup is done by like 9:30 p.m.
Yeah, I mean this slate is just insane right now.
No, I don't mean done like they're out of it. I mean all of their players' games are over.
Oh,
because
yeah, that's also true.
This Philly-Charlotte game, if Harris is out and Maxey's already out and now Ish is out and everyone else is out for COVID, you're going to have lineups with if you're crunching, you can't tell me you're not going to have some lineups that have that if you just crunch and don't touch any of the settings, you're going to have 7 players from this game.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then also even looking at the late games, there's obviously appeal in the Golden State Orlando game, but it's pretty likely to be over after 3 quarters. The Clippers Portland game is kind of outside of a couple of spots, mediocre for DFS. Same with the San Antonio Phoenix game. There are plays there, but the priority plays are pretty much all early tonight, it seems like. So yeah, you're right. I think you're gonna have a lot of people winning tournaments at 8:00 and then just kind of having to wait 4 hours to see what happens.
That's never fun. You always rather climb the ladder than try and kick somebody off.
It's so much more fun, watching your team climb than just anti-sweating somebody catching you.
Well, because if you never get there, you never get there. But when you're there and then you drop,
you no matter how many times you're in that position, it never stops feeling like you just lost money.
Right. Yeah. It was never there. The money was never there, but it felt like it was.
Right. I'm still kind of crying over the $1 million I lost yesterday.
Yeah, it was a 6 screenshot though in the third quarter.
Yeah. I was just happy to finally get one. I'd never actually gotten one.
All right. Anything else with Denver? Oh, and we got an ownership update for Ish. We still have to wait on. Dude, we're gonna have to update ownership every 10 minutes.
Yeah, nothing else from Denver really. The only thing I would point out if you are playing large field tournaments and feeling risky, Zeke Naji played a ton of minutes last game. Now that was partly impacted by Aaron Gordon being in early foul trouble in the third quarter. But even if you look at Naji's first half rotation, he played around 12 to 13 minutes. I don't think it's guaranteed that happens again, but if you potentially get 24 to 26 minutes from $3,800 Zeke Naji, that is a potentially slate winning value. So I don't think it's super likely, but if it does happen, you probably would like to be there.
All right. So decent timing, at least on this DeRozan news. You've got no DeMar DeRozan. So take him off the floor, take him out of your player pools. We'll have another update for projections soon enough. Zach LaVine, 35% usage rate in 271 minutes without DeRozan this year, 1.26 fantasy points per minute. I'm not accounting for the games that Vooch was also out, but obviously Zach LaVine benefits in a huge way. But Vooch has also produced very solid per minute numbers in 147 minutes without DeRozan this season.
Yeah, this is another spot where things just really, really changed, and obviously wasn't prepared for it, but there's just more usage to go around now for LaVine, for Vooch. Those are the two that I would expect to benefit the most. Just thinking about, in terms of play styles, Lonzo's not likely to take on a ton more usage. That's just not really his game. Without DeRozan this year, 271 minutes for LaVine, 35% usage rate, 1.26 DraftKings points per minute. Vooch is at 1.31 DraftKings points per minute with a 24% usage rate. Those guys both look good. There's more production available for somebody like Derek Jones Jr. I was assuming he was going to start anyway, but now I think that's even more likely. So he looks even better as a $3,600 value option. There's more minutes available for Dosunmu, who doesn't do a whole lot when he's out there, but he's really cheap. There's more minutes available for Troy Brown Jr., who sucks at actual basketball, but isn't bad as a fantasy option. Those are always fun guys to target when they're really inexpensive. So a lot just opened up on this team as well.
No doubt. Jordan, I'm going to let you know if we have to push the Hall of Fame segment to tomorrow, just based on the timing. All right. We do have some free content today, though, if you're looking to jump in on that. NFL Showdown rankings, NBA player projections and NHL player projections, all free. You don't need an account or anything like that. You can jump over to awesemo.com and check all that stuff out for free today if you'd like to. Any other thoughts on the Bulls with DeRozan out? Any value here that opens up enough for us to get to? Or because Caruso also doubtful to play.
Right. So I think it's the Sunmu, Jones, Brown, possibly Alize Johnson being the value pieces that you can take shots at. In terms of priorities, I think Derek Jones Jr. is one. I'm assuming he's going to start. If the Sunmu starts at 3,100, he's fine. If Troy Brown starts, he looks even better because he's the better fantasy producer between the two. But yeah, I think you're probably going to have two really cheap guys starting for the Bulls.
Okay.
Also, Aaron Holiday confirmed starting for the Wizards.
Aaron Holiday starting, you said?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we're getting some news rolling in. Again, Josh and Greg coming up next, live before lock, taking you till 7. Hey, hit that thumbs up too. What do we get? 67 till we get to 400. Doing our best here to navigate the choppy waters of the NBA DFS world in early December. It really does feel like April, doesn't it? Or March basketball right now.
Yeah, it does. It just, we're already at the point where it just feels like all the work you do all day is just like wiped out now.
Yeah, it does. Cleveland and Milwaukee. And we're still waiting on Giannis too.
Yep. And Towns and Russell.
If Towns and Russell or even one of them is out, because there's a good chance Beverly doesn't play either.
Right.
Well, we'll get there. Let's
and
talk
we're still
about
waiting on Harris.
And Tobias Harris.
And the other, the 6 guys they're going to be ruled out that we don't know about yet.
Yeah, right. Maybe this one will be a little bit easier to get through though. Cleveland on the road against Milwaukee. They are, what's the spread here? 6.5 points. They're actually playing decent basketball. 213.5 point total. Evan Mobley, Adam, kid looks pretty good, man. I feel like every time, right? And this is probably just recency bias, but doesn't it feel like every time a center or a big man is drafted as a lottery pick in like the top 3 to 5 picks, he just disappoints and then they wish they drafted someone else over him?
Yeah, but Evan Mobley, more of a wing, or at least, he's a big,
sure.
but he's,
But I'm saying where he's listed at. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but he's
like
been
Marvin
fantastic.
Bagley.
Right.
Aiton as a rookie. There's a lot of them that just.
Yeah. Normally because it's a combination of one, you don't really need centers anymore that much. And two, typically they kind of just end up sucking. But no, Mobley has been an absolute star so far.
He's awesome. Do you have any interest in him today? We got him around 10%.
Yeah, I think he's really favorably priced. He's 6,600 on DraftKings. He's around a fantasy point per minute guy, but he's also likely to play 37, 38 minutes. The only thing that kind of drives down Mobley's value is that just, the shit that's going on this slate. You have so many value plays. I don't really know how much, let's say 35 points that 6,600 gets you on this slate. But as far as guys in that price range, I think Mobley's one of the better options.
Anything else for Cleveland, or should we get to some good spots?
I think we can get to some good spots. I mean, I think everybody's aware Darius Garland, Jared Allen, these guys are capable of having big games, but there's just a lot of players ahead of them in terms of who you're prioritizing.
All right, then let's talk about Milwaukee. We're still waiting on Giannis. This is, I don't know. We're still waiting on Grayson Allen too, dealing with an illness, and George Hill, who's been playing considerable minutes this season, 27 plus per game, is questionable with a knee. So let's break it down, man. We got 19 minutes to go, but this is probably an important spot to hit on.
Yeah, this one is obviously dependent entirely on Giannis, but it's another team where the pricing has already elevated because Giannis missed the last 2 games. So if he's in, it sort of just looks like Giannis or bust. Granted, we do also have Grayson Allen and George Hill questionable, but like if we assume everybody's in, it's sort of just Giannis or bust because Holiday's priced up, Middleton's priced up, Portis is priced up. But if Giannis is out, there's still upside for guys like Holiday and Middleton. They have both averaged around 1.2 DraftKings points per minute without Giannis this year. They don't look like necessarily the best plays on the slate because the salaries have adjusted at least a little bit, but there would still be some value there. Same goes for Portis. So this one is one where it's just a lot depends on Giannis.
You see totals drop a lot in football games for one reason or another. I just saw a video of that weather. The total's gone from 48 to 40.
in the football game.
Yeah, that's crazy. 48-40, drop 8 points.
Yeah, that's not. What is it? Bills and
Patriots. Yeah.
Patriots.
Yeah. Stick around for that after NBA Live Before Lock. These guys got you covered going up to 8:15 kickoff. Okay. So yeah, let's go to some other spots here. Unless you want to hit on anything else for Milwaukee. I know it's tough with Giannis. Josh and Greg will get you covered on that because we should have, maybe not. It's an 8 p.m. lock. Maybe we won't. We might have something, but anything else that we should just pay attention to here or make contingency plans, who the best options are, or are you good?
I mean, I think I'm good. There's just so many moving parts here. I mean,
I know
Mamukelashvili started the last game. Like that's a possibility today, I guess, if everybody's out again, but more likely than not, you're going to have at least some of these guys in. So I think it's most succinct to just kind of say, if Giannis is in, Giannis is the guy you want from Milwaukee. If he's out, then everyone else that is playing just starts to marginally look better.
For sure. Kevin, still take the under. Maybe. I don't know. Josh Allen's pretty good. Both these teams have played in some. Yeah, I know, right? It's not been great. Both these teams have played in some bad weather games, though. 40 is a pretty low total. And Patriots going to run the shit out of the football tonight. Let's talk about Atlanta and Minnesota. We'll get to Minnesota with Towns and D'Angelo Russell and Pat Bev. All of that stuff going to play a huge role on this 10-game slate. But we can kick it off with Atlanta first. They come into Minnesota getting 2.5 points, right? 222.5 total. So that's the highest total on this entire slate, Adam. Do we want to load up on any Atlanta players, any John Collins love for you today? Maybe a little Trey Young. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think they both look pretty good. Collins rather at 7,100, I think looks like a strong option. He's likely to give you 34, 35 minutes. He's around the point per minute guy. Minnesota's been very good defensively this year, but they also play at a top 10 pace. So it's a situation where you're giving up a little bit in the way of efficiency, but you're getting more possessions. You're getting more opportunities from a stealing standpoint. That looks really good. So Collins looks good. Trey Young's been more aggressive recently. He's been more productive overall. Usage rate's up a couple of points over his last 10 games compared to his season average. Same goes for assist percentage. I think he's kind of like James Harden in that he was really negatively impacted early in the season by the refs basically just refusing to call anything a foul. And I think that A, he's kind of started to figure it out, and B, the refs have taken a step back. So you're seeing him, just play better, produce at a higher level. He's relatively expensive, but there's no shortage of value tonight. So getting to Trey Young makes sense. I think him and Collins look like the best two options from Atlanta, particularly if Cam Reddish is back.
All right. So with Minnesota, Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns, both questionable. Do you have any, this would be the first and most important question. Do you have any lean one way or the other?
No, I thought Towns was going to play last game and he didn't. So I feel like it's a legit Q tag, and the same goes for Russell.
Okay. So with Pat Bev, he was actually getting a lot of minutes, right? This guy before the injury in late November was playing a lot of minutes. He's questionable. I think if you have to assume one way or the other, since he hasn't played in over 2 weeks, you'd say he's out. But if Russ is also out, now I'm not saying Bev's out. I'm saying it's a very good possibility that he ends up sitting. If D'Angelo Russell also sits dealing with that ankle soreness, then I know it sounds crazy, but now that Ish Smith's out, do we not have to at least entertain the idea of a Leandro Balmaro or something? He played 25 minutes last game.
Yeah, the minutes were there. He was the first guy off the bench replacing D'Angelo Russell. For the season, he's played a total of 102 minutes. He's averaged 0.58 DraftKings points per minute.
That's the part that's not very good.
12% usage rate, 12% rebounding percentage, 8% assist percentage. So certainly not at the top of my list of guys that I'm trying to get to. There would be more.
If Towns is out too, then you have Edwards and Malik Beasley. Maybe you see his usage increase a little bit. I'm not even trying to make an argument for him. I just know a lot of people are going to be scrambling to get other value in there with Ish Smith out.
So he would go in the bucket of he's going to get enough minutes where he has a chance for success at 3K. Yeah. The reason he still doesn't stand out though is that there's a lot of those guys on this slate. Sure. Even behind the guys that we actually like as values, there's like a whole second section of $3,000 to $3,500 3K to $3,500 guys where it's they could conceivably play 26 minutes and do well. So he kind of ends up in that bucket, I think. I think, if guys are out, the bigger bumps are Anthony Edwards, 8,100. He has a 41.7% usage rate. Without Towns and Russell on the floor this season, he would be essentially the entire offense. You would get more usage, you assume, from Malik Beasley. He's been disappointing from a fantasy standpoint, but they're kind of running out of options if Towns and Russell are out. So they would both look really good. If Towns is out, Naz Reid becomes one of the most obvious values on the slate. So another team with just a ton of moving parts where you can't really have a definitive answer right now, but you do want to at least kind of quickly have in mind what you're going to do in case you get this news at 7:15 or something.
Yeah, you're not getting away from Naz Reid in a spot like that at center.
Especially with power forward eligibility as well.
Right, good point. Yeah, there's no way. Beasley played a lot of games, not this year, but in previous years without Russell, without Towns. Remember when the whole team was hurt, I guess 2 years ago?
Yes.
Not when he was in jail.
That's also possible.
Yeah, the whole team, and Beasley was getting a lot of run and just really was disappointing. But like you said, at that price point, I'm not necessarily sure what alternatives you have. Like he's going to be getting a lot of opportunities. But what if Towns is in and Russell's out, or Russell's in and Towns is out?
Yeah, so never mind. Wiley's not doing what I wanted to do. I was trying to get Beasley's numbers without Russell and Towns since last year, but it won't take Russell off. So if Towns is in and Russell is out.
If Towns is in, when did last year start? It started December, right?
December 11th.
See if it works for me. No, it was like right 2 days before Christmas.
Yeah.
The 2020 season?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, no, I finally got it. Beasley's at 0.99 DraftKings points per minute, 24.4% usage rate in 479 minutes without Towns or Russell since last year.
Yeah, so not bad.
No, not at all. Edwards over that time has a 32.5% usage rate, but you also have to keep in mind that he has become quite a bit more assertive this year than he was last year.
He was not good through the first couple of months of his rookie season. Yeah.
No, he was not.
I remember people were on Twitter saying, what's that?
The worst number one pick ever.
Is that not the dumbest thing you've ever heard? I mean, I get hyperbole and you got to spew hot takes and nonsense on Twitter, but I mean, back up. There's a fella in Cleveland that went number 1 overall not too long ago, and he'd have something to say about that.
Yeah. Jimmy Butler expected to play.
Okay. Yeah, Anthony Bennett. I mean, come on. Anyway, if one's in, one's out. Yeah, we got. Is there anything else for Minnesota right now? Obviously, we'll pay close attention to this news.
Not really. I mean, Vanderbilt's getting more expensive. He's always viable because he's so good at rebounding, but it's kind of just wait and see at this point.
Yeah. And yeah, guys, of course, it's Bennett. It's got to be Bennett. No, it's not even Fultz. There's no way. You can't say
it's not Fultz.
It's not. And if there is no bigger critic than Fultz than myself, but Fultz, like if he's healthy, is still a starter who isn't a net negative to a team. Anthony Bennett was barely a bench player. So
Josh said, although Candy, that one's viable.
Yeah, it's Bennett.
Kwame Brown played in the NBA for like a decade.
I know. And now he is a media sensation.
Yeah, that too. But like that's one where like, yeah, Brown was a bust. He didn't live up to hype, but he also wasn't supposed to be that good. And he still had a legit career.
Right. Yeah, exactly. He just gets a lot of hate. Anthony Bennett was not an NBA player.
Right. Darko wasn't a number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, someone already mentioned that. All right. Jordan, we got 3 games to go. So let's skip over Awesemo Hall of Fame. You'll be producing tomorrow, right? We'll make sure to hit this. We had a ton of winners yesterday. So I did not forget about you guys. It's just this list of winners that we have is long. And if I went through all of it, we wouldn't have time. Instead, we talk about worst number 1 overall draft picks 10 minutes before lock.
Somebody asked if you were talking about LeBron.
What?
Butthole Jenkins wanted to know if the number 1 overall pick from Cleveland that you consider the biggest bust ever was LeBron.
Yes, that's precisely who I was talking about. LeBron James. San Antonio and Phoenix. Let's dive into this one, Adam. The San Antonio Spurs are 7.5 point dogs, 216.5 point total. I looked up the Suns record the other day. I was just looking through standings. Have you seen what their record is?
No, but I'm going to guess that it's very good.
Take a guess if they've played 21 games.
17-4.
They're 19-4, so 23 games. So are the Warriors. Insanely good teams. We'll talk about both of them. What do you think about the Spurs against the good Phoenix defense?
Yeah, still minutes available for the Spurs. You have Ketabich Diop available, but Devin Vassell's still out. So there is some value to be had here, not in the sense of, priorities and guys that you're jamming into all of your lineups, but there's a good chance that you're getting mid-30s in minutes from Keldon Johnson again. He's 5,600 on DraftKings. You have Derek White's been playing more minutes. His salary is up to 6,500 on DraftKings, but if he's going to play around 36 minutes, he still offers, a little bit of value here. Jakob Poeltl at 6K flat, likely to play 30 to 32 minutes in a matchup against Ayton. He's around a fantasy point per minute guy. And then obviously, if you can get up to DeJounte Murray, that is good. He's around a 1.3 DraftKings point per minute guy. He rebounds well. He does pretty much everything well. So there's several guys you can, that look like solid options here. There's not one guy that stands out as being a great option in the context of the slate.
For sure. Joshua Schmeck says, y'all crazy. Greg Oden over Durant, absolutely the worst. No, it wasn't. Because it was an injury.
Right.
These other guys were just awful.
Yeah, and we're not talking in the sense of like a number who's the worst, like who's the best number 2 pick.
Right.
Because yes, in that case, yeah, Durant, taking Oden over Durant was really bad, but just in the sense of a massive bust, it was Bennett.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they regret it. I'm not saying it was good.
Right.
I'm just saying the guy, you never really knew what you could have gotten out of him is all. What about Phoenix with Devin Booker sidelines for this game, Adam? Does that open anything up for us, or have prices adjusted enough with him sidelined since November now that we're not doing much here?
No, I mean, it still opens stuff up because prices haven't adjusted that drastically. It gives you an elevated ceiling for somebody like Chris Paul. He's averaged 1.23 DraftKings points without Booker on the floor this year. DeAndre Ayton is still relatively inexpensive as well at 7,400. Cameron Payne is interesting. He was getting a ton of ownership earlier. Right now we have him projected for 32% ownership tonight. I get that he has a path to success at 4,100. I don't think he should be that popular on this slate. I don't know if that's going to come down between now and lock or not, but the reason that I'm hesitant on Payne at high ownership, he's a very, very good per minute producer, but in most games, even with Booker out, you've been getting like 54 minutes combined between him and Chris Paul. So if Paul happens to play 34 minutes, you're looking at like 20 minutes for Payne. Now, last game they did combine for 58 minutes, and it is possible you see a little bit of extra playing time here because you're talking about a San Antonio backcourt that includes White and Murray. So maybe you do get 58 minutes again, but it just seems like at least we're projecting the field to assume that you're getting 58 minutes and that you're going to get 24 minutes from Payne and 34 from Paul when we haven't seen that be the case outside of one game. So I'm not confident that Payne doesn't do well. I'm not saying that, but I do think right now he's projected to be quite a bit over-owned considering there's a good chance he plays 21 or 22 minutes.
Do you think he'd be under the field on him?
Yes.
Okay. Orlando is the biggest dog of the night by a wide margin, 15.5-point dogs. You don't see that too often in the NBA anymore. Golden State, though, you come into this game against the Warriors, who have the number 1 defensive rating in the league and the number 3 offensive rating in the league. Meanwhile, Orlando is 28th in offensive rating and 26th in defensive rating. They're also down Jalen Suggs, who has been out. I mean, this is going to be a bloodbath, man. I would never taking 15.5 or laying 15.5 is tough to stomach because garbage time can make some things happen. But if the Warriors won this game by 40, I wouldn't be surprised at all. They
can absolutely torch this team.
That's what I'm saying. 15.5 is not that much in this spot.
No. And so on the one hand, if Orlando keeps this close, you're getting tournament winning scores from some combination of Anthony, Carter, Bamba, most likely, particularly Anthony. But it's just so difficult to see how they keep it close. So in tournaments, I think you can take shots at guys like Cole Anthony, at Carter, at Bamba, but obviously just keep in mind that it's very, very risky and this game could absolutely be over after 3 quarters.
So is there anything, why don't you cover both sides of this one and then we can talk about this Portland Trailblazers situation to close out the show before we hand it over to Live Before Lock.
Okay, so on the Orlando side, we have 10% ownership going to Anthony, 6% to Carter, 3% to Bamba. Nobody else above 1% on DraftKings. That's pretty much how I see it as well. Anthony, Carter, and Bamba are all good fantasy point producers. If Orlando does somehow hang in this game, there's a very good chance that at least one of these guys is doing well. So at relatively low ownership, I don't mind mixing them into some lineups, but I'm not prioritizing these guys just because, there's a lot of other options on the slate. On the Golden State side, they're a little bit less risky than Orlando because if they do blow the Magic out, there's a good chance that they just had an efficient 3 quarters, but there is still some risk because it could also just be a case where Orlando is incapable of scoring against Golden State and Golden State's offense doesn't even have to do that much. Curry at 11,700 at 5% ownership
Harris
has a
in.
massive
Sorry,
ceiling.
Tobias Harris in. Sorry, go ahead.
What'd you say? Harris is in?
Yeah, just for anyone making lineups right now. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, Tobias Harris active today.
So Curry obviously has a really high ceiling, but still competing with a lot of guys at the top end. Any of Draymond Green, Jordan Poole, Andrew Wiggins look fine, but not prioritizing a ton from this game just because there's so many other things to prioritize on this slate.
All right. You ready to wrap it up with the Clippers and Blazers?
Yep.
We're going to make it, man. I didn't think we were. I mean, you and I have done these shows together for what, 5 years now or so, around that. And I don't remember the last time we had this much news on a deeper dive from 4:45 to 6. So not bad. Pat ourselves on the back. Hit
probably
that
last
thumbs up.
April.
What's that?
Probably last April.
Yeah, probably. But a lot of that shit they're ruled out in the morning, so at least a lot of that. But thank you, Michael. Yeah, Jordan saw me sneeze and was like, let me leave this on screen. He saw it coming. I had to stare at the light because it makes you sneeze. Does it make you sneeze if you stare at the light?
Never tried.
Or not try. It's just
paid attention to it.
25% of people, they say. I'm one of those special people. CJ McCollum for tonight is probable, but you have no Dame, who's going to be out a little while. And then Anthony Simons being out as well. So what do we do with an expensive McCollum and then Dennis Smith Jr., who you talked about to kick off the show?
McCollum's fine in tournaments. You get increased production, increased opportunities without Lillard. The issue is just that he's priced for Lillard to be out at this point at $9K. So you're not getting a ton of excess value there. It's just that he still can go for a ton of fantasy points. Dennis Smith Jr. is still underpriced though. Saw someone in chat ask what was up. He went from not playing to, projected for 32 minutes. Damian Lillard and Anthony Simons being out is why Dennis Smith Jr. is expected to play a ton. He played about 36 minutes last game. He's around a fantasy point per minute guy. So at 5,300, if you assume he plays somewhere between 32 and 36 minutes, he just looks like a very, very good option here. There are alternatives to him in his price range, but he's also not projected for crazy ownership. He's at 22% right now. I think that's very reasonable. He looks like the top guy from Portland. Norman Powell, Yusuf Nurkic, CJ McCollum, all fine tournament options, but Smith, the one that really stands out.
As far as priorities go, are there priorities for the Portland Trailblazers? This is the last game, so I want to make sure we lock it down since it's a 10 p.m. start.
Dennis Smith Jr.
Like he is. Okay. Yeah. Cause we have him at 20% right now, which seems about right. Is there anything you like for the Clippers?
Not really. I think it goes without saying that Paul George is a good play if you can get to him, but this team is really kind of confusing right now in what they're doing. On one hand, Serge Ibaka at 3,400 has the potential to be a really, really good option here. On the other hand, I have no confidence in what they're doing with him. He played 28 minutes in his start a couple of games ago. Then he started the second half of the back-to-back, but only played the first half. I don't really know if what their plan is going forward. I think it's reasonable to think he plays like 24 minutes or so tonight, but he's also taking up a center spot and he's really, really, volatile. So I don't have a really good feel for that. Alex has him at 18 minutes right now. I think that's a reasonable projection as well, even though I would probably go a little bit higher. But yeah, there's just not much here given all of the other options on the slate that we can get to.
All right. Well, that was a wild show and we almost got in under it. Thank you to Jordan Klein, as always, for producing today's show. As he shakes his head at me for some strange reason, got the fresh cut, little skin fade action back there as well. Hit that thumbs up while you're waiting. We're almost at 5. We got 60 away, 2,900 people watching. Do not go anywhere. Josh Engelman, Greg Ehrenberg taking you up to lock. followed right after that by NFL Live Before Lock. No joke. You're going to want to stick around for that if you're playing. Look at some of these videos on Twitter of the wind, 25, 30 mile per hour sustained winds. So that'll be Eric Neal and Matt Savoca. We got you all the way up till kickoff right here at Awesemo. Peace.
We are live. Welcome to NBA Live Before Lock. It is Monday, December 6th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Greg Ehrenberg. We are brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy, and we are in for a pretty interesting 56 minutes, I believe. This one's going to get wild. If you haven't done so yet, and judging by the numbers, I don't think you have, so I'm putting that one on the feet of Lofty. Hit that thumbs up. We need to run those likes up because I got a sneaky suspicion you're not going to have time to do it later when all hell breaks loose. So get those likes in now if you can. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Greg, are you ready for this?
No, but I mean, like Jordan asks us every show before we start, are you guys ready to start? And today in particular, the answer was no. But, you know, what are we going to do? There's a million guys ruled out. More guys are going to be ruled out. I don't know what some of these starting lineups are going to be, but there's nobody I'd rather parse it with than you.
Well, that's good. That makes me happy. I'm glad to hear that. I have not a lot of good thoughts at this point on this slate. Everything's going crazy. And what's really wild is that it certainly changed on FanDuel. It's way worse on DraftKings than it is on FanDuel now with the Ish Smith news. Like, that was a very different play. Not that he wasn't a great play on FanDuel, because he clearly was, but it was not the same thing as it was on DK. So the turmoil isn't hitting me as aggressively, but the DeWar news is massive. The Tyrese Maxey news is pretty big, considering he has played more minutes for the Philadelphia 76ers this year than any other player on the Sixers. Do you have anywhere that you just want to start, like, in general? Is there anything that you noticed or like you wanted to talk about right out of the gate so we can just get it done?
Yeah, let's hit the Bulls, just because this is the most substantial piece of recent news that we also don't really have some of the same data that we have for other teams, just because it's a new Bulls look team. And I'm just trying to really parse out who some of the value pieces I want to get to are. Yeah,
let's do it. So let me grab our most recent run of ownership. Actually, I threw it in for FanDuel, but I didn't grab DraftKings, and it was updated 1 minute ago. So just in case you don't have it, we did get an update a minute ago.
Not from the minute ago.
Looking at the Bulls, we've got Levine in the 20 to 25 range, depending on whether you're on FanDuel or DraftKings. Lonzo is at 26 on FanDuel, 8 on DK. Again, he's $1,000 cheaper there. Derek Jones Jr. is just chalk on both sites. I'd like to have a conversation about that, particularly on FanDuel, where he's 4,400. And now Dosunmu and Troy Brown are both in the 10 to 15% range on DraftKings. To me, interesting as well. So Levine, obviously, you can kind of just jam in and not feel bad about it. Like, his ownership is never going to catch you off guard. He is the guy that you expect people to get to. I don't know if I love him at 28% on FanDuel, but I know why it's happening. Similar story for Lonzo on FanDuel, where it's just like, yeah, he should be owned. It's going to change a little bit, and he's going to play 36 plus minutes. Derek Jones is the piece that makes the least amount of sense to me. It makes more sense on DraftKings at 3,600, but at 4,400, if he's in a quarter of the lineups, I'm just not going to have him, and I'm going to hope for the best.
You don't think he starts though?
I do think he starts. I gave him 33 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like he's super good. That's like, he's a 0.8-ish fantasy point per minute guy stepping into a team where like he just has to do dirty work for 33 minutes. Maybe like on a point per dollar basis, if we're talking more about cash games, yeah, for sure. He is certainly more in the mix, but a quarter of the lineups on Derek Jones Jr. on FanDuel at 4,400. It's not like he's still in the threes. Like, that's a real price tag for someone that probably doesn't deserve that price to begin with.
Yep, fair enough. I haven't updated. I'm playing on FanDuel and DraftKings. Probably a mistake. Typically, most days I'm like, hey, I'm on a show. I'm going to try to only play on one site. For today, for whatever reason, like I'm playing on both sites, and maybe the worst possible slate to be playing on both sites. But that aside, I've run my DK lineup, so I was getting to a lot of Derek Jones Jr., but I haven't ran FanDuel yet.
Zaire Williams active for today, so good. That's one thing that I don't just want to have to deal with. Do you have any particular Levine thoughts? I mean, I think he's pretty self-explanatory.
To me, he's just going to be what he was last year at this point, which was a really good fantasy producer, and he's cheaper than he was last year. So that's the one thing that we can look at is for this season, if you're trying to look at the numbers with DeRozan on or off the court. I mean, they didn't have DeRozan or Caruso last year. It's kind of the same makeup.
Yeah. So I'm more than happy to get to Levine. So far this season with no DeRozan on the floor, and I don't think it's important to take off Javonte Green or Caruso for this exercise. 35% usage, 1.2 FanDuel points per minute. That's exactly where I have him in this spot. 1.2 FanDuel points per minute in 37 minutes. We'll see where I actually end up on him. I am getting to a bit more Lonzo at 6,600 than I am getting to Levine. I'm not getting to Dosunmu or Troy Brown really on FanDuel. I think they look a little bit better on DK, 3,100 and 3,400 respectively.
Yeah, I like Dosunmu on DK. There's so many minutes to fill now in the backcourt. And one thing about the way the Bulls constructed their team this year is, at least to me on paper, it looked like the chemistry could be a little wonky. I couldn't have been more wrong. They've looked really good together so far.
Yeah.
But they're not very deep. And you take Caruso and DeRozan out of the mix, and you just have to assume that Dosunmu is going to play, relatively big minutes. He's cheap, and he's shown to be a decent fantasy producer when he's on the court this year.
You said taking DeRozan and Caruso off, and Javonte Green and Kobe White, like they are just hemorrhaging people that are 6'6" and below.
Yeah, and once again, those guys that are playing before, like Green or White, I don't think they're anything better than replacement level players. Not that I think Dosunmu is well above that. Not that we have that much information to know for sure, but he's cheap and he's going to have to play big minutes now.
Yeah. I don't get to anybody else really. Like I didn't get enough minutes to Matt Thomas, Alizé Johnson, Bradley, Dotson. I don't know who the hell it's going to end up being, but like I drew basically the line is drawn below Troy Brown. There's 6 options on Chicago for me. If it ends up being somebody else, like congrats. I'm not going to have that.
Yeah, same with me.
Okay. Well, let's just touch on all of the sort of turmoil teams that we've gotten that happened during the deeper dive. So we get no Tyrese Maxey to Philly. Is your assumption that they go to Shake in the starting lineup? I don't think it has to be that, but seems like the easiest way to do it.
I do assume it's going to be Shake. Now, we've seen Doc Rivers do really weird things, particularly with his guard rotation, as you and I are both aware, because there was numerous times last year when we were on the wrong cheap Sixers guy. But I do assume it's going to be Shake Milton, at least on DK, and I have to see what his current ownership is now. And when I was looking at projections before, he's actually super popular now. We're over 40% owned on DK. On FanDuel, he's a little more expensive, 4,900, but still popping up in 27% of lineups. So I'll probably be underweight to the field on him on FanDuel. I haven't projected really well on DK. Certainly have to consider him in cash games. Whether I ultimately end up over underweight to the field on him, I'm not totally sure. I assume I'll be somewhere around the field though.
I'm under right now. Ownership's going to change a bit. Like we've got Tobias Harris at 2% on FanDuel. That's not going to hold. That's going to go up a little bit. So we'll see. But Shake at 27 on FanDuel at this moment. I have 14. I'm cool with that. No, nothing too crazy. Same for like Embiid is at 24%. Again, I like him. And this matchup looks pretty damn tasty for Embiid. I am a little lighter there as well. I assume it's going to Jokic. I guess I should just confirm it. Certainly is. Yeah, going to Jokic. So I'm going to Jokic over Embiid for right now. Not that I don't have any Embiid. Does anybody else open up for Philly?
I was going to talk on Embiid for a second. I'm kind of bummed the field is rostering Embiid today because he's struggled a little bit as of late. But to me, he's starting to finally get healthier, and he's dealt with so many issues this year. He had the COVID where he was pretty sick for a while. He's been dealing with a knee issue that he entered the season with. This is finally the first time I think we've seen Embiid healthy all season. And I was hoping the field just wouldn't be on him at a slightly reduced price point. And then also just because of some of the results this year haven't been great, but it looks like the field is getting there, unfortunately.
Couple super chats came in. Surveillance Files says, feeling the new cut, Greg, so much value, Ehrenberg. So there's that. And then we got from Brad Kaufman, said, guys, thanks for the coverage every day. Crushed a single entry last night. Came in third for a cool G. Just wanted to pay it forward. Good luck tonight. Jones or PJ Washington for DraftKings? I don't think that's even particularly close. That has to be PJ Washington.
Which Jones is he talking about? Tyus?
I assumed it was Derek Jones.
Oh, Derek Jones Jr. I mean, there's so many. That's such a generic name, just Jones. Like, what do you think of Smith today? I like PJ Washington a lot, so I assume it's Washington over whoever else it would be anyway.
Yeah, I can't think of any Jones that it would be to unseat PJ Washington today on DraftKings.
I think he's asking Tyus Jones just because they're priced kind of similarly, and he's probably looking in a utility spot. But either way, the answer is PJ Washington for me.
I immediately went Derek because of positional stuff. That's a little bit closer. Although FanDuel tonight, by the way, Derek Jones, shooting guard, small forward.
There we go. Well, Derek Jones, just typical. This is the, what do you think's more egregious? Paul Reed at shooting guard or Derek Jones Jr. at shooting guard?
Paul Reed for sure, because he's more like ground bound. At least Derek Jones is like athletic enough to try to guard twos.
Yeah, they do. They just guess some of these positions. It's ridiculous.
James Moore has super chat, says Josh and Greg on FanDuel, who's y'all best 2-stud pay up option and who's y'all 2 fade of the day based on high ownership? Jokic is my favorite pay up option for sure.
2 best stud and 2 top fade of the day based on high ownership. And he's asking for FanDuel, right?
Yeah. Jimmy Butler and Jokic are my 2 preferred pay up options.
I think Butler's.
You can go ahead.
I haven't finished running my FanDuel lineups yet. They're going right now, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to get to a lot of Butler as a fade for me. It's something that you had said before. I think Shake Milton, considering his price a little more expensive on FanDuel, he's somebody who I would like to be underweight to the field too.
Given I've already rallied pretty aggressively to it, and I look at my crunch, and this is the guy that I'm most under on right now, Derek Jones Jr., and then, I don't know, maybe Jeremy Grant at 7,700, Draymond at 6,900 here. If that game's not competitive, Draymond's taking an early shower. If I know Draymond, I know that he is not getting up for an Orlando game.
Yeah, he scores like the same amount of fantasy points every game anyway. Draymond these days, Draymond every day is like low 30s fantasy points. A lot of floor there, but not necessarily a lot of ceiling. And then obviously if the game's a blowout, that's one thing that could reduce that floor a little bit. As an interesting pay up option, I think Giannis could go really overlooked if he remains questionable heading into lock. And right now we have his ownership set at. He is 5% on FanDuel, and on DK, Giannis is 1%. If he plays, that number should be way higher.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And I will likely have a decent amount, as I normally do, which usually ends up screwing me in some way.
Yeah, I'm actually, relative to what his ownership is, 1% on DK, 5% on FanDuel. Giannis is the player I'm most overweight to right now.
Karl Anthony Towns will play. By the way, the other piece is D'Angelo Russell out. Patrick Beverly out. My crunches out.
It was inevitable, right? There was no way they were hitting on all of those, but let's try to figure out.
I don't think I was sticking the landing on the next 7 that I needed. So let's walk through Minnesota. That's obviously where we're going. So we removed D'Angelo Russell. Now, I was never expecting Patrick Beverly to play, so that one isn't changing anything for me. Giannis, game time decision for today. Thanks
Nothing
for
changes
that.
there.
Yeah, super helpful. So let's think about it. It's been a while since Russell's been out, right? Unless I missed one recently. No, I'm right. He hasn't been out in at least the last month. So we would be going back to a time that is different.
and I'm pretty sure Beverly was in that time. That was when Beverly was a super popular play. So we are looking at a different scenario now. And I have the usage rates pulled up right here. No surprising, Anthony Edwards leads the team in usage with D'Angelo Russell off the court. 33.6% usage rate for Anthony Edwards. Karl Anthony Towns, 28.1% usage rate. Although his fantasy production is not crazy high on a per minute basis with D'Lo off the court. 1.2 fantasy points per minute for Cat this year without Russell. I would have just assumed without looking at it that number would be a little bit higher. As for other guys, there's just not that much usage to go around beyond that when you've 33.6% going Edwards and 28.1 to Towns with Russell off the court.
Towns shooting 40. I don't know what he's shooting when Russell is on, but shooting 45% from 2 with no D'Angelo Russell feels oddly low for him, given that he's a center, because he's still shooting 44% from 3 in that scenario, 57% true shooting. Well, let's walk through this. Who starts? Who is taking D'Angelo Russell's spot in the starting lineup for today?
I assume Malik Beasley.
Really?
We've seen them do that. We saw them do that last year.
This feels like a different Malik Beasley now.
Listen, if they want a dude who's going to come out and chuck shots at low percentage, and that is Malik Beasley is the perfect guy to slot in place of D'Angelo Russell.
Feels like it's super easy to play Jordan McLaughlin like 22 minutes as the normal rotation, and then he doesn't basically see the floor in the fourth quarter. Although that you could also replace that statement with Jalen Noel, and I'm totally cool with it too. It could be any one of those idiots. All right, so we basically need to replace 34 minutes, call it that. So what are you looking to do for Beasley? I had him in for 27 previous to this news. Does that become like 30, 32, something in that neighborhood? Like somebody's about to soak up. Leandro Bolmaro will start for D'Angelo Russell. So we can both shut up.
All right. Well, now we've got that news. And all right, let's look at Bolmaro's rates this year. Shockingly, somebody who I've not looked into a whole lot so far this year, Leandro Bolmaro. So he has played 8.5 minutes per game. Absolute crap for fantasy production. 4.92 fantasy points per minute in 8.5 minutes. He's not someone I'm going to be interested in.
Where's this? When did they last play? Was that yesterday, 2 days ago, 3 days ago? 3 days ago it is. So Bolmaro played the end of the first quarter, middle of the second quarter, and then a gigantic rotation between the third and the fourth. So he was kind of playing alongside of like all different kinds of people. Played alongside D'Angelo Russell quite a bit, actually. They did not close with him. Obviously, Russell closed in that scenario with Edwards, Reed, who won't be Reed, it'll be Towns at that point, Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley, because they were missing everybody. So Towns closes, Edwards closes, Vanderbilt, I assume, closes.
As long as he's not in foul trouble.
Beasley probably closes now. Fifth person up in the air, the TBD, basically.
It's good. Yeah, it'll just be, it could be Torian Prince if he's playing well. Maybe it could be McDaniel. There's a whole bunch of different ways they could go. As for, did you look at Bolmaro's usage rate in the last few games?
Only thing that I have in front of me now for Bolmaro is with D'Angelo Russell off. He's played 74 minutes at a 15.5, and I can go ahead and assume that that's actually lower. And considering he's going to be starting with the starters, in particular Edwards and Cat, I'm guessing it's pretty low.
So his minutes have been, a little more substantial in the last few games than it was earlier in the season, which isn't that hard to do because he wasn't playing at all. So let's say 3 games ago, he became a regular piece of the rotation. What would you guess in those 3 games is his highest usage rate?
Well, you're obviously setting me up here, so I'm going to go with like 8 or something.
6.1 is his highest. His usage rate in those games: 6.1, 2.7, and 6. This guy just does cardio. He goes out there and runs up and down the court.
Yug, that's not ideal. And like the only thing that really changes in all of this stuff is Anthony Edwards is just going to gun.
Which he was going to do anyway.
He has not met a shot he doesn't like. He's met a lot of shots that he doesn't make. That's for sure.
Have you noticed if you ever watch Wolves games, there's times where Edwards touches the ball and catches, starts walking back on defense. It's really funny.
That's not surprising at all. I like him, but like that dude is hella inefficient.
Oh, I mean, I very much enjoy Anthony Edwards, especially his highlights and his interviews after games are over. But Karl Anthony Towns, I could see why he could be a little frustrating as a teammate.
No Jalen Noel as well. So what do you want to do with Bolmaro from a minutes perspective? My first shot was 26, and I'm still kind of spinning my wheels as to where I go from there.
Yeah, it's hard to. I think 26 is reasonable, especially when you consider some of the games where Taurean Prince has started a few games as of late, and I think they could kind of be playing that Taurean Prince type role, where even when they were shorthanded, Prince the last 3 games started 23 minutes, 15 and a half minutes, 20 minutes. I could see that kind of being the Bolmaro role, where it's like, hey, he starts. If he's playing okay, we'll leave him out for more minutes. But if not, then it's just he plays a few minutes here and there.
Are we going to get like a decent chunk of Josh Okogie just trying to like chase around Trey Young today?
Maybe like 18 minutes.
Yeah, I went 20, so that seems like a reasonable stance there. 28. Beasley, something in that neighborhood. 30 is probably like the cap if you're coming off the bench that I feel comfortable with.
Well,
it's fun.
No, here's the issue. If I give Malik Beasley 30 minutes, then I'm playing a lot more of Malik Beasley than I actually want to play. So
does he have a dumb price on DraftKings today?
He is 4,400.
Okay. Just shooting guard too. Okay. All right. So that's 20 to Koji. I need to give someone additional minutes. Is it Nathan Knight? Is it Jordan McLaughlin? Is it
McLaughlin,
Layman?
in my opinion?
I mean, I thought they were going to use him more this year, and they don't appear to care to.
No.
But, backup rotations at the point guard seem more obvious today. All right, I'm feeling pretty good here. Nope, can't give Malik Beasley 38 minutes, or I'm going to have all of him. That won't be fun. Yeah,
or it could
28.
be.
I went to 28. I think we're looking at Edwards as pretty clearly the best option. Karl Anthony Towns as the second best option. Beasley is interesting-ish. I don't think that Russell being out has like created a new piece of value here. Like Bolmaro's the flat 3K, but he sucks.
Yeah, I can't play somebody who's had a usage rate of a total of like 4% over the last 3 games.
All right, George Hill out. Grayson Allen expected to play. That's actually really interesting considering how much George Hill's been playing as of late. Past 5 games for George Hill, averaging 27 and a half minutes.
Thing is, though, is there any point in updating the Bucks until we get Giannis news?
Yes. Probably not the answer you were looking for.
No, because because we're guessing whether he's in or out, and then if we guess wrong, we're just redoing all of it anyway.
Well, who do you think benefits from George Hill being out? Like, I think that's a real discussion whether Giannis plays or not.
Fair enough, and yeah, I guess that's true. If Giannis is out, it is going to make somebody look a little bit better, sans George Hill, but I guess Pat Connaughton, just because they need. Well, Grayson Allen's been out lately, so that's something else where George Hill's minutes have been impacted by that. I don't know that it's going to.
Javonte Smart is just probably going to pick up more, maybe.
It's not going to create enough. It's not going to make me want to play somebody else I wasn't going to play otherwise.
I agree there. Oh, damn. I don't even know if I have Javonte Smart in my stupid stuff. I'm almost positive that I don't. I haven't even added him to the damn sheet. Him and Wesley Matthews. Stupid Bucks. Javonte Smart, come on down. You're the next dude on my sheet that doesn't exist that I probably won't update because I don't think you play enough.
I don't know. You're going to be in the rotation anyway.
Yeah, look, for the Bucks, this can get very like Raptors-y, where you play like Javonte Smart for 12 minutes and Wesley Matthews for 14 minutes, and now you've just filled the George Hill role. Or add Jordan Nwora to do some of that. I mean, we got 27 minutes out of Rodney Hood. most recent game? Does that happen again?
Great. Well, Grayson Allen was out then.
Yeah, but now George Hill's out.
And Giannis was out then. If Giannis comes back, he's not getting those minutes.
That's fair. Do we think like Pat Connaughton or Grayson Allen are getting more minutes now other than like maybe 1 or 2?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
Obviously, the big thing is here's what's going to happen. Yeah, I assume Giannis is going to play, though.
Oh, you're going to eat those words.
But probably. I have a 50-50 shot, though. Might as well take a stance on one side.
You do indeed. Does George Hill being off matter at all from a rates perspective? It can't, right?
No.
It's actually probably worse.
Yeah, because he's just a low usage guy that is a willing passer.
Yeah. All right. I just gave a smattering to Rodney Hood and Wesley Matthews and Jordan Nwora, and I don't think it matters at all. And I'll add Javonte Smith later. Oh, yeah. George Hill was out on Saturday as well. Stupid Saturday games. Yeah. Mamu's not going to start unless Giannis is out again.
And not that he did anything with that start anyway.
Negative. Yeah. I don't see this as a big change for Milwaukee. Other than still wanting to roster Giannis and not really all that interested in anybody else from Milwaukee.
I'm getting to so much Giannis relative to his ownership right now. It is going to be so annoying for me if he's rolled out.
And yeah, that's about good here. And
yeah, we're caught up on news.
Just like that, it's 6:30. Dude, we move through this show so fast. It's insane.
And for whatever reason, there's so much more news on every show I do with you compared to anybody else, just without fail.
I'm not happy about that. Let's be clear here. That doesn't make my job easier. I don't like it. Let's hit on some of the things that I know that I have to hit on this show. 1, NFL Live Before Lock is coming up at 7:15. You're probably going to want to watch that one because from everything I'm understanding, this Bills-Pats game is looking pretty ridiculous from a weather perspective. Our NBA projections are free for today. NFL rankings are free, and our NHL projections are free. Jordan, we're going straight into the Yahoo read, and you can get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum if you sign up using the link in the description of this video. Who doesn't want 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum? All you have to do is click that link, deposit, and play. That is it. Yahoo will then send us your name after you play in your first paid contest. We will then reach out to you via email with a coupon code to get you started. If you need immediate access, email support@awesemo.com. We can help get you set up. You can also get a free $10 of site credit by clicking that link. Can enter you in the $150,000 Monday Night Football baller. You can save it for this coming Sunday for the $1 million baller that has generally like $200,000 of overlay. It is very clearly the best contest that exists in this industry on a week-to-week basis. If you're not playing in it and you play in other NFL contests and you play that much volume, you are making a gigantic mistake by not entering it. So make sure you use our DFS tools and projections. It's all designed specifically for Yahoo to give you your best chance at winning. Welcome to the starting lineup. Shake Milton. Hornets will start Hayward, Martin, Oubre, Bridges, Richards. So that is going as we expected. The trivia question here for you then is, how many minutes does Nick Richards play? Because they seem to give him the bogans pretty significantly, where you play like 6 minutes at the start of the first and third quarter, and then you park your ass.
Yeah, and we saw that a lot from him towards the tail end of last year. I can't remember exactly what the injury situation was, but I'll have to look up Richards really quick. But I remember there was a point in time where he was starting last year, and it was the same thing where he just didn't get big minutes. So I think that's going to be the same deal. 2 starts this year, 7.5 minutes, 6.8 minutes last year. Oh no, we didn't start. I must be thinking of somebody else last year. But either way, I can't have any faith in somebody who's averaging 7 minutes per game in 2 starts.
I think it was Vernon Carey.
Oh, that's right. Same dude, right? What's the difference?
Same team. Yeah, it's all the same nonsense. I just gave Shake Milton an extra minute. The Hornets lineup is exactly what I was expecting. So what's your expectation on James Bouknight? Because I feel like people want to hear his name get spoken into existence. And while I think that he's going to get some run, he is not a guy that I'm super interested in as of right now.
So I think that I'm actually kind of surprised the spread for this game is only 7 points, considering the Hornets injury situation. And I do think there's a pretty big opportunity for him to just play all of the fourth quarter in possible garbage time and do really well then. I don't have a ton of them, but I have them like 10% of my lineups.
Okay. I think that makes some sense. Yeah, it is interesting to see that the line did not move a ton. It dropped from a total perspective. What was the other big piece of news? Oh yeah, the Chicago line. I knew that I didn't update all of my lines yet. So let's try running a crunch again. That went well the last time. Not true, but you know, what are you gonna do?
It's never ending. You update the lineups, you're finished running. It's like, oh, look at this. Let's change some players' projections and then run another set of lineups.
Yep. I do love running crunches though, as weird as it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to do anything. You just press the button and you sit there and look at the numbers change on the players.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like therapeutic. Cam Reddish, game time decision. So for those of you that think that matters, it doesn't. That's exactly what we were expecting the entire time.
By the way, I think this is
so much Jokic.
A relevant question we got in Discord because it's related to Yahoo is the sponsor of the show. Morgan2424, are there any major scoring differences that I should know for playing on Yahoo for the first time? Same scoring as FanDuel.
Yep. And if you don't know what that is, it's 3 points for blocks and steals, 1 full point lost for turnovers. I don't remember what the difference is between rebounding on FanDuel and DraftKings, but it's 0.05 points one way or the other, so it doesn't matter. No bonuses.
It is 1.2 points for rebound on FanDuel, 1.25 on DK.
I can never remember which one's which, but it's just one of those things where it's just like, it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, well, you've never run your own fantasy league back in the day where you had to hand calculate your own fantasy scores.
That's a very true statement. James Hay says, can you guys talk through your thoughts on Stars and Scrubs roster construction for tonight? Plays versus fades. Thanks for all the DFS advice. I don't think about it. So I want to play the guys that I think are best and not play the guys that I think are overowned. I don't think about roster construction at all. That just comes out in the wash. But the more and more news we get, the more and more I'm going to be playing a Stars and Scrubs build by default.
Yeah, it's almost always on these slates ends up being Stars and Scrubs. Now, with that said, who the stars are on this slate is maybe not the top upper echelon of guys that might be on other slates. I like to get to Giannis because of his ownership being a little bit lower than we would normally expect. But then Zach LaVine, I think that he's the number one top overall star to me right now as I'm looking at my current exposures. The question just becomes like, what are you considering a star? Zach LaVine is 9,500 on DK. Over on FanDuel, he's 8,600. It's just too cheap of a salary with DeRozan out, in my opinion.
I don't know what it is. I feel like I'm a little low on LaVine, but I don't really think that I can change anything. No, I don't feel like I'm low anymore, given what I'm looking at. Thomas Buckley with the super chat. If you guys are max entering, do you crunch 150 lineups or go crazier with like 500 and take the top ones? My goal is at least 1,000, and generally I'm shooting for 2,000. There's no scenario where I want less information.
Yep, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. Unless he's asking, is it a thing where how many lineups we crunch or how many lineups we enter? Like you're entering multiple tournaments. Because if I'm playing multiple, like 20 max 100, I'm still just playing the same 150 lineups, but entering them, into different contests. It's not something where I'm actually playing 800 different lineups. If that's what the question is.
That's a good point. Good distinction. Can we talk about Cody Martin for a second? We had him at like 10% ownership on FanDuel, and that's causing me to get too much Cody Martin. Do you like him today? We have him at 14% ownership today at 5K.
I mean, we just found out he's starting, so yes, I like him.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that goes up now because, I don't know, I've got him scoring a lot of fantasy points. I mean, relative to Cody Martin, at least.
I have him for a little over 26.
I got him at 30.8 on FanDuel.
Okay, that is that is a lot of fantasy points. How many
33 minutes.
I have him playing a little bit less. I kind of dispersed the minutes.
I'm going to knock his usage rate down a point just from what I'm seeing. How is it 6:37 already? I am over time moving fast. It's fun. I do enjoy when like we get these ridiculous slates where you and I don't have to really follow any sort of pattern. It's just read and react and go for it. Like,
yeah, that's
probably
why
there's probably a way to prepare for that too.
No, there isn't. It's because we get those production notes too, right? Because there's people we work with who is like, can we do more segments on the show? It's like in theory, but it all goes to it. Like we get 3 minutes into the show and it goes to crap anyway.
This an NBA show on a slate with multiple games is impossible to sort of like want to do stuff for. If it's a 3-gamer, it's just like, yeah, we can approach this differently. On a 10-gamer, no, you're just you're getting it. Particularly in like the COVID era now, or in like March. We got more super chats. Thomas Kingston, SGA, Levine, Smith Jr. or Murray, pick 3. I don't know which site, and that's really hard.
So
Levine, Smith, Murray, probably.
Well, so the thing, I mean, these guys are in such different price ranges, right? Like, how do I compare Dennis Smith Jr. to Zach LaVine?
I mean, I would say that you don't, but that's just me.
Well, let's see. Of these guys, who am I getting the most exposure to? So LaVine would be one of them. Dennis Smith Jr. also depends if we're talking cash games, or I guess Dennis Smith Jr. would be one. And I don't know. I've been so off on Murray all year, and I'm not getting to him again today. So not him, I guess. But also, but once again, I do find this a really difficult question to answer because these are just guys priced, totally different.
Well, it's Dennis Smith Jr. as a value option that like I'm happy to get to, and I'm going to get to a lot. SGA, Levine, Murray, like I don't care who ends up in my lineup. I like them all. I mean, like I don't love SGA coming back after being out for the concussion, but he's going to play his normal run. It's just I think Oklahoma City sucks. Jordan Young. I tried to upload lines on my phone, took Josh's advice and bought a laptop. Too much of a headache. Appreciate you guys. Smart. Yeah.
I remember that
for phones.
I remember that super chat.
I don't mean like, didn't mean anything by it negatively or anything. It's just, it's a lot to do. It's a lot to do it on a computer with 2 monitors, let alone to do it on a phone. I could never. I would immediately email DraftKings or FanDuel and tell them to unreg me, which has happened.
Yeah, it's something I have to do all the time. When we're doing these shows, it's like 6:40 if I'm playing on both FanDuel and DK, and all of a sudden something happens where there's a piece of major injury news, and I'm doing a show and can't do both. I have to shoot a message to Sport and be like, "Hey, withdraw my entries," and they do it in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's great. Darren Unger, favorite power forward plays on FanDuel. Guys I have the most of. Tobias Harris, but his ownership is going to come up, so I'm not entirely sure where that ends up landing. PJ Washington for sure. Isaiah Stewart for 5,300 looks pretty damn good. Not too much below him. So it's like PJ Washington, Isaiah Stewart, Wendell Carter, Jaren Jackson, Tobias, Giannis.
Yeah, Giannis. Miles Turner's another one that I'll add into the mix.
Yeah, I forgot he had power forward eligibility on FanDuel.
Yeah, and he's been much better about fouling this year. Now watch him go get into foul trouble. But remember, we had that last year with Miles Turner where he just could not get out of his own way. And actually, we're seeing better results from Jaren Jackson Jr. with regards to fouls. But recent games for Miles Turner, there was a game against the Bucks, which was a blowout. But beyond that, 36 minutes, 31 minutes, 34, 34. And he's pretty consistently been scoring over 30 fantasy points. So Miles Turner, to me, is a solid option.
I like it. Yeah, the minutes have been so interesting. I always feel like I take him on the day that he doesn't play 34 minutes like he does pretty regularly, but I've been a Miles Turner stan for a while and have always wanted Indiana to get rid of Sabonis to make their team make more sense, but they don't do that ever. Pacers standard issue starting lineup: Brogdon, Duarte, LeVert, Sabonis, Turner. Pistons: Hayes, Cunningham, Bay, Grant, Stewart. So no news there.
Yeah, and I was going to add one more aside about that is now that they have Rick Carlisle as the coach, and everybody's talking like, oh, where should the Pacers trade Miles Turner to? Rick Carlisle likes Miles Turner more than he likes Domantas Sabonis. There have been a lot of games this year where Turner's playing in the fourth quarter and Sabonis is not. If one of those guys are getting moved, I think it's more likely to be Sabonis.
I'd be interested in like a Sabonis Siakam swap if you aren't a big believer in Precious Achiuwa, and then let Sabonis be the 5 for the Raptors. You get a lot of long guys there with Barnes and OG Anunoby that could like make up for his defensive limitations a bit.
I'd be more interested like Sabonis for McCollum.
I just have so many guards. Like, yeah, you can kind of do that if you want to get CJ to Philly and Ben Simmons to Indiana. It's not like Nurk's long for Portland, so I also think that if that trade goes down, Dame is now officially somewhere else.
Dame's staying. He's never going to request the trade.
I don't think Damian Lillard is on the Blazers to start next season.
I do, because there's all these unsubstantiated rumors. People like Dame wants to be traded. Then Dame will go on Twitter and be like, I never said this. I don't want to be traded. And everybody's like, oh, look at this. Dame wants to be traded. Like, no matter what he says, people just assume he wants to be traded.
Jordan Lockhart with the super chat, just the nightly hello, and thank you all for the content. Prayers up for a bunch of Awesemo winners tonight. I
Appreciate you.
I agree. Prayers up for me winning tonight. Weatherman says, I think y'all forgot about my other super chat. Maybe. I mean, these are coming in pretty aggressively. We have 3,400 people in. So if we did, apologies. But also, are y'all preferring the Joker as the preferred pay up option on DK? It's the same $600 entry GPP. Jokic is scary on DraftKings to me. Scary in that that's a healthy price tag. Not that I have a problem with it.
I'd rather play.
Clearly don't. He's Jokic.
I'd rather play Giannis if I had to choose between the two of them. And
I'd rather play Embiid.
I mean, that too. I have more exposure to Embiid, but Giannis is projected for 1% ownership on DraftKings.
Yeah, well, there's that. But I mean, you and I both know that Giannis isn't 1% owned. Like, that's just not a real number.
Depends when the news comes out about whether he plays or not. If that's news that comes out like 15 minutes before the game starts, I don't think people are going to play him on a 10-game slate.
There's a 0% chance that Giannis Antetokounmpo has 1% ownership no matter what. I'm not saying that it's like 20, but it's no lower than 4 or 5 just by default.
Yeah, maybe. I would still be overweight to him at that number, though.
People are building that and like hoping they can swap out of it later at best. Like it's one's just not true. Like I would manually change that. Otherwise, instead of getting like a normal-ish amount of Giannis, I would end up getting like 45%. His leverage would be ridiculous. Oh my God, it's 644. Dude, this is moving. So what news are we waiting on yet? We still have 16 minutes to go. What have we missed?
All right. So don't have to reiterate what I just said, but Giannis is questionable. That's something we still need. Cam Reddish, he's a game time decision. Nasir Little is questionable. Neither of those are going to really move anything too much for me. The big one's obviously going to be Giannis, and everything else kind of taken care of at this point. Yeah.
We're in the ballpark. Tupelo Joe says Josh is always right. Just ask him. Damn straight. Jaden McDaniels available to play. That doesn't help me at all because I immediately thought like, for which team? Because I don't remember which one's which ever. One of those guys needs to be named Tim McDaniels so that I could remember who's who and which team they belong on.
Yeah, that would be helpful. You know what I'm actually interested in asking you, because as I'm trying to finalize some of my lineups here, what are you doing, Miles Bridges, today?
That's a great question. Let's see. On my last run, speaking of people with names that confuse me, we had him at 11% ownership and I was getting 10%.
Okay.
So nothing of interest because I was basically giving all of my ownership to Cody Martin.
Yeah, I was getting to...
Just to be clear, you're asking me about Miles Bridges and not the Phoenix Bridges of Mikal.
Miles Bridges of the Charlotte Hornets, who's a front runner to win Most Improved Player of the Year, and there's nobody else of value playing alongside him today.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't think that's good for him, but we shall see. I mean, he's going to try to dunk on someone, that much I know.
He's going to take a lot of shots.
He certainly is. Uh-oh.
What happened there?
Your camera shut off. What's the deal, man? Everything's flipped on its head.
All right, we're back. I don't know what that was.
I've been down that road before, brother. Goody. Dare play both Jokic and Embiid together in a DK GPP. I mean, it's a lot of salary, but go for it.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that.
No, like it's all about what else ends up in the lineup. Nobody was ever mad that you played two really good players together. Robert says PJ or Miles Turner on DraftKings. PJ coming off the bench. PJ was always coming off the bench.
Miles Turner for me.
Okay. Brandon Clark ruled out. Not news.
Nope. I mean, is, but not that I care about.
All right. 3,333 is the amount of concurrent viewers that I see on my screen with 733 likes. Hit that thumbs up. I think we have 1,000 in our sights if I just talk about it a lot over the next 13 minutes. So if you haven't done it yet, hit that thumbs up. We're working hard on this Monday. We're back. No Gur Mondays here. None of that Garfield nonsense. We're giving you the goods all the way up until 7 p.m. Yeah, Dirty Dan said he's not going to like. Well, that's why you're Dirty Dan. Clean Dan would hit the thumbs up button. All right, we're up over 800. That's fun. Okay, I finally got 1,000 lineups done. I'm gonna have so much Jimmy Butler. That's exciting.
I'm in the same boat as you, Jimmy Butler. If we're talking about guys that are priced over 8K, the one I have the most exposure to is Zach LaVine. Jimmy Butler second.
I am going to be light on Zach LaVine, and let me tell you what, that is not a stance that I want going into lock. That's the way that it appears that it's going.
What is it that has? Oh, I just wanted to ask you, what is it that has you getting underweight to Zach LaVine?
I assume just some other guys in that price range that are lower owned. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but I was under when we started it. I'm reopening everything now that I've exported. I'm still getting my weird Excel error where I can't refresh my tables every once in a while, and it causes me to want to commit murder. So one day.
So here's something that's kind of surprising me as I'm running my lineups. I'm getting to a decent clip of DeAndre Ayton today, and I was not really expecting him to come up all that often. And I think that there's something where I just look and be like, why am I rostering so much Ayton at $7,700 on FanDuel and $7,400 on DK? Especially because off the top of my head, he hasn't played all that well recently, but he's also been in some really brutal matchups. He's played against the Warriors in 2 of the last 3 games, and then also was a really long road trip for the Suns. They played, 4 games in a row on the East Coast. So I think this is a pretty good potential upside spot for Ayton.
Yeah, I'd be happy to get to Ayton. Quickly unrelated, Cody Martin up to 24% ownership on FanDuel. So my crazy stance is going to go by the wayside now. But yeah, no, I have no issue with Ayton. He's different for me on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, but I thought he looked pretty good given his price tag earlier today.
Yeah, no, I'm getting to him on both sides.
All righty. Well, Crunch is refreshing. So now I'm going to have an actual look and can probably paste 150 lineups in and at least save myself a little bit. What are those numbers supposed to be? Correlations. I don't even remember putting that in this sheet. All right. My most exposed player as of right now is Dennis Smith Jr., 5K on FanDuel. That is just fixing to not go well. Jimmy Butler and Kelly Oubre right behind him with Nikola Jokic. Now I don't mind that too much. I'm getting a ton of Kevin Huerter. So let's go ahead and dial that down a bit. That doesn't feel all that necessary. And let's keep crunching out some lineups. 10 minutes to go. So who are some of your most exposed players right now?
Yeah, so I'll do DK right now. I just uploaded my DK lineups. My FanDuel lineups also set. I'll go position by position on each site. So point guard on DK, it is Shake Milton, who I'm also underweight to on FanDuel. But on FanDuel, my most rostered point guard right now, like you, is Dennis Smith Jr. Like you, I also don't feel good about it at all because Dennis Smith Jr., remember those games that he started for the Knicks where he was super popular and sucked in all of them and we all gave up on starting him, and now all of a sudden he has one game where he scores a bunch of fantasy points and plays well and we're all on him. He projects well for me, so I kind of find it unavoidable, but it leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, it leaves a horrid taste in my mouth. I'm not excited about it, but like when I see Jimmy Butler and Kelly Oubre in a lot of my lineups, I'm like, cool, that'll work. I get it. I'm happy to take those stands. I don't feel the same way about DSJ at 40% ownership, but they don't really have a ton of options for him to not be out on the floor.
Yeah, that's the thing is if I want to dial back his projection, I have to look at the team and say, all right, where do the minutes go? He played 37 minutes last game. And then you have to start to figure out if he is not going to do well. I have to assume it's because I have to expect him to not be on the court, because you can't reasonably project him to play 36 minutes and be like a 0.4 fantasy producer or something like that. So then you have to start say like, okay, where are the point guard minutes going to go? And then you look at the options and it's nowhere. They're not going to play Ben McLemore at point guard. There's not going to be, Keldon Blevins isn't playing a bunch of point guard minutes. So it just by default, it becomes Dennis Smith Jr. barring foul trouble.
Weatherman says DKGPP, Embiid and Young, or Jokic and Levine, or Giannis and Levine. Last spot to finish my lineup. I hope you can see that. That was a tweet from Ira Windeman.
He has me blocked on Twitter, but
Butler available. Cavs normal starting lineup.
All right. So Weatherman's question: Embiid and Young, or the Joker and Levine? That is Giannis and Levine for me.
Okay. Wow. I have a ton of Jokic, and I am cool with it. I have a ton of Andrew Wiggins as well, which has become something that I didn't want to do, but. Oh, that's Aaron Wiggins. I'm in the wrong cell. I mean, I still have a ton of Andrew Wiggins, but yeah, there's that.
I was getting to a lot of him earlier today.
I like him on FanDuel today at 5,600. It's just a really good price.
Yeah.
Getting to a lot of Malcolm Brogdon now too. He's like 15% owned. That's certainly a guy that I'd be happy to take shots on, given the fact that he can play 40 minutes in a competitive game easily.
I'll run through some of the other positions I haven't talked about yet. Shooting guard, Zach LaVine on both sites. I'm going to be very high on Zach LaVine today. I know Josh feels a little bit differently, but LaVine, I'm expecting a lot of the usage to go to him. Small forward on DK. I like Derek Jones Jr., where he's only 3,600. Small forward on FanDuel. I'm getting to a good amount of Karis LeVert. He finally bounced back last game. He really struggled for an extended period of time, but a lot of that could be attributed to he was playing shorter minutes. Last game, 37 minutes. If there's no kind of real minutes restriction on Karis LeVert anymore, it's just the incorrect price for him at 5,100 on FanDuel.
DK single entry, best 4,200 and under utility player that isn't Cody Martin.
All right, let's see. Who do I have projected for the most fantasy points, 4,200 or under? That isn't Cody Martin.
Correct.
All right. So I'm scrolling. Shake Milton, if you don't have him. If not Shake Milton, Cameron Payne.
Anthony Edwards or Miles Bridges from Brad Kaufman?
Anthony Edwards.
Okay. I am going to... Did we get any more super chats? I simultaneously hope so and hope not.
I'm scrolling just to make sure.
All right. I'm throwing my 150 in right now just so I can not have the panic feeling in my chest that was starting to rise up a bit. I have my dummy lineup in. It's real and it has no one in at the 7:00 game. So worst case scenario is I just sit back and relax, but that's not exactly the game I'm trying to skip.
All right. Let me get back to while you're doing some updates.
I'm most rostered.
Good. Oh, you're good? All right.
Yeah, well, but you can keep going with
all right. Yeah. I'll go anyway. You could be on the eye for any super chats that are probably.
We just got two more.
Oh, cool. All right. So let's read those.
Sorry, boys, coming in late. Should I be playing Giannis? I have him in right now. We thinking he plays. Thanks. I think you should be playing Giannis. I have no idea if he plays. I am going with the assumption that he does play. The thing that you should do most of anything is figure out what you do if he doesn't. If you don't have that plan set, then no, you shouldn't play Giannis.
And here's the thing that's easy about Giannis. The pay up options on this slate all start at the same time as him or later. So it's not hard to get to Jokic, who is also expensive. Also, did he say whether that's FanDuel or DK?
No.
No, either way, there are guys to swap to, especially on DK. Like I said, there's Jokic there, who is a pretty easy swap, at least for DK purposes. And then for FanDuel also, it's not going to be difficult considering it's the 8:00 start time to do some kind of global swap or just swap optimize over in Fantasy Cruncher, re-upload the other lines. I'd feel differently about Giannis if it was a 10:00 or a 10:30 start and he was a game time decision. But yeah. I'm just assuming he's in for now. If he's not, then I'll readjust, change my projections, and re-upload.
4 minutes to go. If you haven't gotten your lineups in yet, you better push it now. And 881 likes. If you want to be a part of getting to 1,000, and honestly, you should be, hit that thumbs up. It'll help us out a ton. We're almost at 1,000, and it would be nice to see. I'm real forever. Lonzo Ball or Cade Cunningham on FanDuel?
Lonzo.
Yes, I have more Lonzo for right now, and I haven't projected higher.
As do I.
Kevin says, thanks, fellas. Pre-tip after I crushed this slate tonight. Thanks for the pre-tip. I love it when we get just the tip from one of our people watching the show. 912 likes. You guys didn't answer the like call there as well as I was hoping. Oh, man. All right. So here are the guys that I'm most over and under the field on. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Top 5 most over: Jimmy Butler, Kelly Oubre, Nikola Jokic, Dennis Smith, Malcolm Brogdon. I got a little bit of Kyle Kuzma at 3% ownership. I'm not mad about that. And a little bit of Cole Anthony at 3% ownership. Those are guys that I'm willing to take flyers on. On the guys I'm most under on, Derek Jones. We talked about that one. I have a very small amount of Zach LaVine. That I am not happy about, and I don't think I can correct it. Draymond, Jeremy Grant, and Cade Cunningham. And then for those of you that watch my shows regularly, the next guy up on that list is Karis LeVert. So that should feel really good when he goes nuts again. Can I bump Zach LaVine's projection and get... Yeah, I have 90 seconds. I can do this. I'm going to give Zach LaVine an extra fantasy point and take him from 2.5% ownership to 6% ownership, something in that neighborhood. There we go, 5. I don't know if that's a great idea or not, but I'm not upset that I got a little bit more of him. Maybe I can just blame it on having a bad projection from the beginning.
Or just, yeah. I mean, I think he's a good play though. And especially with DeRozan out, particularly on FanDuel where he's so much cheaper than he was for a lot of last year. Since some people might want it, we've got 45 seconds or so left here. My most rostered power forward on DK is Miles Bridges right now. It's actually Derek Jones Jr., but already talked about him on small forward. Power forward on FanDuel for me is Isaiah Stewart. At center, I'm really spread out at center on FanDuel. My most rostered one is Miles Turner. I have a bunch of guys, though, that are with like a handful of exposures. Nobody I'm massively exposed to at center on FanDuel, and DK is also Miles Turner.
I am massively exposed to Nikola Jokic, 44.7% on FanDuel. We have him projected for 15. I will never be mad about having a ton of Jokic, and I've had a ton as of late. I am 2x the field on Jaren Jackson. That one I'm pretty happy about too. Scares me, but dude's been good.
Yeah, he's been, and he's taking more shots now. He's avoiding picking up 3 personal fouls in 2 minutes, which is always nice for his fantasy output. He's in over 20% of my lineups on FanDuel.
Well, there we are, folks. 7:00 lock. Don't leave your computer. Grizzlies will start Jones, Bane, Brooks, Jackson, Adams. So we knew that. We made it. I feel like you and I started to the show 5 minutes ago, like normal.
It feels like less than 5 minutes ago.
It really does. That was the fastest hour of my life. Greg, I think you got something that you want to plug.
Do I have something I want to plug?
Apparently, no. Greg's got a new injury report show with Adam that debuted today. You guys should check that out.
I forgot about
real
that.
Good piece of content touching on what the injuries are that we're waiting to hear about throughout the day and sort of what you should be paying attention to and how it'll affect you if these guys are in or out. Did I do a good job of plugging that for you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And the day moves so fast. I totally forgot I did that earlier in the day. But yeah, so Adam and I, weekdays, we're going to be doing injury report videos now and just kind of quick overview. We're not doing like 30 minutes or 40 minutes or something like that. I'm just picking out who are the key players that are on the injury report and what is the fallout if those guys get ruled out or if they play.
Alrighty, folks, that will do it. Thank you for joining us. Remember, NFL Live Before Lock coming up in 15 minutes. You don't want to miss it. Good luck. Enjoy. Win some money. We're back again tomorrow doing it all again on a nice 3-game slate where we can take our time.